this at some later date. Today is Monday, December 13th, 2021. And this is a meeting, a public of the Board of Architectural and Review and Historic Preservation for the Village of Southampton. I'm going to take roll call, and then we'll talk a little bit about the agenda and tonight's process and proceedings. So by way of roll call, and I have on my screen Peter DeWitt, Sarah Latham, John Gregory, and Mark McIntyre. With those four people and myself, we have more than a quorum, so I move that we open tonight's meeting. Do I have a second on that?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Peter. And all in favor? Aye. Okay, so now that we've opened a meeting, let me tell you that we have a very long evening, a long agenda. So you will be with us a very long time this evening, should we go through the entire agenda. I've spoken to council before. I've also spoken to folks at the Village Hall. And if my fellow board members are up for it, we can have a supplement meeting, which would provide an opportunity for those who wish to adjourn this evening to be heard 2 weeks from now. Now that meeting would be on Tuesday, not Monday, Tuesday the 28th, Monday being a Village Hall holiday in as much as Christmas falls on Saturday. So I open it up for discussion among the board members. And if we agree to that, then we'll put it out to those applicants to see if in fact they would prefer to adjourn or stay here till perhaps as late as 1 in the morning or later based on the current agenda. So lady and gentlemen, what do you think?
I'm fine with an additional meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
As much as I would love to be here until 3 o'clock in the morning with everyone, I think it's the smart thing to do.
Okay, so we would need at least 3 people to attend. It looks like everybody is volunteered. So we should be able to command a quorum. So on that basis, and Alice, I've checked with the village, and this they've actually put a placeholder notice for Tuesday the 28th in the paper. So is there anything we have to do beyond that before we ask the applicants if they wish to adjourn?
No, I would just note that if there are any new applications that were noticed for the first time for this evening, that we would call those applications when they come up on the agenda, or we can do it now and take jurisdiction and then adjourn them to the 28th.
Right. So let's do it now and get as much out of the way as we can. So of those folks who have appeared to us before and for whom we know we have jurisdiction, are there any of those applicants who would wish to adjourn to Tuesday the 28th?
If you want to adjourn, please raise your hand.
Thank you. So raise your hand so Kat can see it. A second.
So far, no hands are up.
Okay.
Everybody wants to be heard.
Okay. So are there those among you who are presenting tonight for the first time who would be willing and interested in presenting 2 weeks hence? If so, raise your hand. No takers. Okay.
Oh, wait, whoa, we have one hand went up and went down. Okay, no takers.
Okay. So we'll continue on. There may be a change of heart later on. I do plan for us to take a 10 or 15-minute break at 9 o'clock because I think we'll all need that. My dog does. So let's proceed. And we have most of the files. Kat has most of the files, some we don't. So let's just get right into it, unless Alice has anything else we have to do before we start.
I thought you might just want to mention that if, someone tonight is a no-show, that they would also be adjourned without prejudice if it gets too late and, there's something else going on they can't interrupt.
Right, okay, yes, thank you. And Kat, can they always text you a comment or a request?
They can to the SHV Village video now one.com.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
But
put it out.
online, they'd have to raise their hand.
Yeah, they have to. We don't
Okay.
have the chat on here.
Yeah, okay, good. Well, that's fine. All right, so let's proceed now. Just a couple of ground rules for tonight to expedite things. I'd like to see if we can conduct the meeting with courtesy, cooperation, and collegiality, a little alliteration. And so the presenters can speak without interruption. Then the board will speak without interruption. We'll toss it back to the applicant, then open it up to public comment, and then final discussion. Does that sound good, Alice?
Mhm.
Proper? Okay, let's see if we can abide by that. So first on the agenda are minutes for November 22nd, which I have in front of me. Has everybody had a chance to read that? And if so, I would move that and if there are no edits, then I would move that we accept the minutes. Are we okay with that? And if so, do I have a second?
Second.
All right, Peter had his hand up first, so accepting the minutes, aye. Okay, minutes are in the record. There was on the original agenda a pre-submission conference for 385 South Main Street. That has since been changed. Jackie advises me that they will now be submitting a full-blown application. Council has prepared a written decision on Holly and David Shear, SHERR, at 303 First Neck Lane. Alice, if you just want to summarize that, and then we'll vote on it.
Sure. The owner applied to the board for a certificate of appropriateness for the construction of a detached garage, pergola, and exterior alterations to an existing accessory structure. And the board found that the project was appropriate and also found the massing and materials to be appropriate.
Okay. So any further comments now that everybody's had a chance to read it? Okay. In which case I would move that we accept the written decision related to Holly and David Shear at 303 First Neck Lane. Do I have a second on that?
Second.
Second by Mark. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, so that written decision is accepted. Okay, now we're going to move into public hearings within the district. The first one is End By the Way Trust, Subtrust A and Subtrust B at 88 Gin Lane to relocate an existing structure. Is the applicant here or a representative for the applicant?
I thought that was adjourned.
They requested an adjournment.
Oh, really? Was that a carryover or? Okay,
No, this is a new adjournment request.
okay. Okay, so now this, if you recall, and reading from the minutes of November 22nd, a new policy has been drafted to address the board's policy on adjournments. Any applications adjourned 3 times will need to re-advertise.
And is aware.
Was that? Okay.
I notified the applicant.
Okay, so now Alice, when we say, and Jackie, when we say re-advertise, are we talking about notice in the paper, notice to neighbors, posting on the property,
Just posting and mailing.
I'm sorry?
Just posting and mailing.
Posting meaning?
Like you put up a sign at the property,
Right, okay. Right,
but not to the newspaper, no.
okay, good. All right, so the neighbors, good. Okay, great. Okay, the next application is that of Forrest Bliss at 88 Meadow Lane for the demolition of a dwelling. If the applicant is here or their representatives, please step forward.
John Bennett.
Okay. John, how are you?
Good evening.
Tell us who you are.
Okay, my name is John Bennett, and I'm counsel for the applicant, Bennett and Reed, 212 Windmill Lane, Southampton, New York. We submitted a package last Thursday in response to the analysis of Alistair Gordon, of course, we've objected to as an independent analyst, and other comments raised by the board. And this evening, I'd like to introduce, hopefully they're on, Valerie Campbell, my co-counsel from Kramer Levin in Manhattan, and Susan Snyder and George Thomas from Civic Visions, who is our expert. I'd like to both of them to talk a little bit about their background, because very impressive in both instances, and then I'll turn it over to my co-counsel Valerie Campbell from Kramer Levin. Valerie, hopefully you're on. I think you have to unmute yourself.
I'm unmuted.
Okay.
I did find Valerie. I didn't find the other people, John.
Okay.
Okay, so folks, you have the floor uninterrupted.
We'll text them.
And when it comes our turn, I'm sure you'll provide us the same courtesy.
Susan's hand is raised.
Susan is coming in.
Okay,
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
She's actually in already.
okay.
Yep. I'll send her the request to start video.
At the risk of cross-talking, Susan, will George be on?
Yes.
Okay.
Um,
Do we have George Thomas?
Yes, we're on the same screen.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Jeff, did you want, somebody else is sharing their screen right now. Did you want that?
Well, it's the applicant.
No, I mean, what I mean is the rule is that I'm supposed to share screen, so I'm just checking with
Well,
the chairman.
I would much prefer, I think it'll go an awful lot
Is that
faster.
okay, Jeff?
Yeah.
In this particular, John, this is part of your submission?
Yes, yes. I think it'll go an awful lot faster because,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. In this case, as long as it's everything and only that which is in the submission.
Yep.
And let me just get that out, John and Valerie. And, all right. And are you all comfortable with me using first names?
You're gonna put us on.
Please.
Okay, then I will. Thank you.
I don't know how to.
Okay.
If that's Susan talking about trying to get on, I'm sending you the ask to start, but there you go.
There we are.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, John, the floor is yours and Valerie's.
Very good, Valerie.
Good evening. I actually think George and Susan are going to start and give their presentation, and then I will follow with sort of a concluding statement.
Okay.
We'll begin. Civic Visions was asked to review the underlying documents on which the ARB bases its decisions to issue a certificate of appropriateness. We were also asked to evaluate the context, integrity, and deficiencies of 88 Meadow Lane. And third, to evaluate the significance of the house in the context of the career of its architect and East Long Island design. You have our report. I am Susan Snyder, an architect working on social and cultural issues. My partner, George Thomas, has a doctorate in the history of architecture, is an expert in historic preservation issues, having co-founded the preservation program at the University of Pennsylvania, and is the author of numerous books and articles on American design. Our practice is Philadelphia-based. We have worked throughout the country with a special emphasis on New York. We have both taught for many years at Penn and in the last decade at Harvard, where we are co-directors of the Critical Conservation Program in the Graduate School of Design. Sorry, I'm having trouble advancing here. Why is that? Okay, yes.
I'm an architectural and cultural historian who for 35 years ran a number of preservation consulting firms while founding the program at Penn and have prepared 100 or more national and local district nominations, as well as individual listings. Districts, as you know, are framed by criteria that lay out what is covered. Boundaries spatially limit the sites covered. Periods of significance are their chronological limits. The document by which your board operates has a clearly mapped boundary and clearly stated chronological limits. This means that if a building is outside the district boundary, it is not regulated. Similarly, buildings that are outside the time frame, as stated in the nomination, are non-contributing. As a result, such buildings have different standards for review. In this case, 88 Meadow Lane is within the spatial district, but is non-contributing because it is outside the listed periods of significance. In reviewing your actions to date, it is clear that the ARB has paid close attention to the document and its constraints. Because of those constraints, your district inventory purposefully excludes modern buildings, including 88 Meadow Lane. All such buildings were listed in the original inventory as modern non-contributing, which continues to be their status. We prepared a timeline of the village regulations to sort of give you an overall frame, as well as when various Norman Jaffe houses are built and their effects. As you can see in this chronology, the village undertook its inventory between 1977 and 1979. The National Register District and New York State District were approved in 1986. And in 1989, those documents became the basis for the local Southampton Village District. The chronology shows that by 1989, 7 Jaffe houses had been built in Southampton Village. None of these have been included as historic resources. The 2009 update to the survey did not identify any Jaffe houses as contributing resources, nor did it extend the period of significance between 1949 or add modern as an architectural style. Next, please. The National Register nomination and the Southampton Village preservation documents, such as the design guidelines, are consistent in framing the period of significance as spanning from the first buildings in the 17th century and ending in 1949. The latest building styles covered are historic revivals, bungalows, and foursquares. On the left, this slide is the National Register list of dates and styles, which you see very clearly with the important architects from McKim, Mead and White, John Russell Pope, and so on. On the left, in the architectural design guidelines, you see the types of buildings that are to be preserved and studied and understood as well. By your own standards, 88 Meadow Lane, because it was built in 1978 and is not included in the inventory, may have a certificate of appropriateness issued for demolition. The red box here outlines properties on Meadow Lane that were reviewed in 1979. 88 is not included. In recent years, 2 other buildings by the same architect on the same street have received certificates of appropriateness for demolition. Nothing has changed in your regulatory documents that would change the status of 88 Meadow Lane. In all of your guiding documents, modern architecture is not a design category and modern architects are not studied. So from that, a little bit on the physical context of the house. The images of 88 Meadow Lane on the left, 170 on the right, and 210 Meadow Lane on the right, is 170 in the center. With the particular note that because of conflict with the original design and the Architectural Review Board, it was demanded that 88 Meadow Lane never be visible to the public from the public street. This has minimized its role in the historic district. Other Jaffe houses on Meadow Lane did not have this screening requirement, as you can see, but nevertheless have since been demolished. Next, please. As you know, the ARB has also permitted the demolition of other houses on Meadow Lane, even including several that were identified as contributing historic resources. In this instance, you see across the top the files on these individual houses from the state website. Next, please. Two houses by Jaffe in the immediate vicinity of 88 Meadow Lane were demolished after review because, as noted in the ARB discussion, they were not listed historic resources. The ARB has permitted the oceanfront vicinity to evolve, with 8 of the 10 sites in this immediate stretch along Meadow Lane built post-1980. All but 1 are new houses. In 2009, the district was reevaluated by a preservation consultant for the village. Buildings that were listed in the original inventory that had undergone significant change were evaluated for loss of integrity that would remove them from contributing status. Because 88 Meadow Lane was never included in the original inventory, it was not reviewed, but it is our professional conclusion that given the loss of integrity, it would have been non-contributing in the district.
Let's look at loss of integrity. The following slides show the extent of alterations to the property and to the house that affect its design integrity. Alterations to the site and building have significantly reduced the integrity of 88 Meadow Lane. You can see on the original site plan on the left that the shape of the roofs frame views to the ocean and to Cooper Neck Pond. As a house was being finished in 1979, application was made to subdivide the property. As you can see in the site plans and aerial photos, the subsequent subdivision of the original parcel of 88 Meadow Lane in 2000 substantially altered the relationship of the house to its site, shown on the diagram on the right. The subdivision cut off the western portion and prevented arrival at the original entrance court. You can see that originally the house entrance was here on the west with a service entrance on the east. And now the entire entrance is on the east. Actually, the new house on the subdivided site obstructed the original unencumbered views from the kitchen and terrace to Cooper Neck Pond. The view is now toward a neighboring house and is again screened by a dense line of trees. Instead of the original command of the site, the house now is cramped as part of a narrow subdivision. What was originally a design focused on views and with the goal of distinguishing between the main entrance from the service zone is now substantially altered. How has the 2000 addition affected building integrity? The magenta tint on the following slides shows the extent of alterations. The loss of integrity is evident upon arrival. When the property was finally subdivided in 2000, the rear service drive became the only entrance. The addition in 2000 of a flat-roofed 3-car garage dominates the arrival, while an out-of-character, battered stone wall leans against the shingle house. The original singular primary roof over the living spaces and secondary roof toward the road, that's up here on the left, has been subordinated by a massive new roof for the addition. You can see the original roofs in the top diagram. The bottom diagram shows in magenta how the view from the north of the new roof rivals the original roof in size and scale, altering the proportions and destroying the integrity. Again, the magenta tint in the photographs shows the extent of alteration. The private side of the house has been similarly altered, with the new wing doubling the length of the house and with a pool and terraces forming a revised setting. New materials and new shapes affect every surface of the east side. The original big brackets that supported the master bedroom are now lost in the addition. The limited views of the house from the beach are similarly affected by large-scale wing that expands the house to the east. In conclusion, as you can see, the property has been massively altered. First, by the sale of the side lot with resulting changes to the site plan and entrance sequence and views. Second, by the addition of an immense new wing that rivals the original house. And third, the impact of a separate volume of the flat-roofed garage wing that blocks views of the house. And finally, by the battered stone base that conflicts with the light structure of the framed shingle volume of the original house.
So the next question as an architectural historian is, we often look at design and a question of originality and significance. This is often framed as how, from a historical perspective, does a building fit into the narrative of American design of the period? Is it an original design or is it derivative? What follows is my professional opinion as an historian. First, some fact checking. Alistair Gordon's report on 88 Meadow Lane errs in claiming that Jaffe was part of the original Joseph Eschrick office that created the modern shingle designs of Sea Ranch. The facts are clearly otherwise. By the time that the Sea Ranch project was initiated in 1963, when the property was actually purchased, Jaffe had left California 2 years earlier to work in New York. By 1964, Sea Ranch was being extensively published, and Jaffe borrowed extensively from its forms, but he had nothing to do with its design. This house is derivative from the West Coast architecture that Jaffe and many of his shingle-clad designs was copying rather than originating. Mr. Gordon's recent text on the house makes it apparent that he is confused about the original conditions of the house. He left out a discussion of the very different first scheme that was designed and rejected by the owner. That plan was relatively vertical and compact, very much unlike that which is described by Gordon. Other features that he described for the original house, such as a swimming pool, never existed in the Jaffe project. The impacts of the 2000 addition doubled the facade, and the incongruous stone base of the new wing that wraps around the original facade are minimally discussed, despite their obvious conflict with the original shingle design. The mimicry of bits of the original house made the impact of the addition even more egregious. Despite Mr. Gordon's claims that 88 Meadow Lane was entirely original, as it can be seen here, its derivative nature is particularly evident in the numerous similar roof schemes that became a standard motif that Jaffe used again and again. These began in the early 1970s and continued into the 1980s. Other houses were nearly identical, despite having very different settings and contexts. This leads me to conclude that the house is not particularly original, and as we will see, is not critical to the Jaffe oeuvre.
We also looked at the deficiencies of 88 Meadow Lane. Careful examination of this house's design development shows a hastily conceived plan that was only resolved by multiple changes of level. Easy enough to ignore when the owners were young, harder as they get older. Here, a two-story house is broken into 7 separate levels, a situation made worse by the present addition that still adds more levels of change. The design deficiencies are magnified by the changing environment with rising sea levels. The house was built to meet the minimum standards of 1978 with the basement 8 feet above sea level. 40 years later, the house is now included in the velocity zones of modern FEMA maps that require a minimum of 16 feet above sea level to the first occupied floor, and with the recommendation of 2 additional feet so that waves can pass under the main horizontal structure. In the present situation, the basement mechanical space is not permitted, and the entire first level would not be able to be occupied space except for storage and a garage, eliminating nearly half of the floor area. These areas are shown as hatched in gray on the right-hand side. Were the house to be updated, it would require physically lifting the building 5 feet, a difficult proposition with multiple half levels, while abandoning the basement mechanical space.
Finally, there is the question of significance. How do we address the significance of this building within Jaffe's career and in East Long Island architecture? To help us place his significance, we looked at how writers studying Eastern Long Island treated him and the house. As you can see in the major publications about Long Island architecture, Jaffe is not included in any of the studies of major architects of the period, instead being accurately seen as a largely regional figure. We also surveyed the literature and did a survey through the Avery Index and ProQuest for articles on Jaffe and 88 Meadow Lane. Most of those articles didn't include this house, and when they did, it was mainly to talk about the Southampton Village Architectural Review Board. The chart of publications shows that 88 Meadow Lane was left out of the text, except for Alistair Gordon's 2005 book on Jaffe. Gordon's 2005 book treated the house as a minor building that was primarily notable again for the conflict with the Architectural Review Board. It received far less attention in the text and in photographs than the buildings that Gordon recognized as significant, which he listed as the Pearlbinder, Becker, Krieger, and the Sand Creek houses and the gates of the Grove Synagogue. In a comparison between his September report on the house and his book text, Mr. Gordon merely added 88 Meadow Lane to the head of the list that was the exact same list as Jaffe's significant buildings without providing any evidence of why it was suddenly added to the list or even bothering to place it on the broadly chronological sequence of its original 2005 list. Yeah. Finally, for conclusions, it is our professional opinion that a COA for 88 Meadow Lane should be granted. The house is not listed as in controlling Southampton Village documents as a historic asset. Since its construction, it has lost both site and building integrity in the subdivision of the site and the additions. The house itself is a minor and derivative design from other sources and adds little to Jaffe's reputation. 88 Meadow Lane is ignored in the general historic and design literature. It is a minor variant on a standard Jaffe motif that was initiated elsewhere. Finally, nearly half the house and basement do not comply with FEMA guidelines. To secure the property for the future and meet FEMA, any renovation would require raising the house to a minimum of 16 feet above sea level. Thank you.
I will follow. I don't have any visuals, so I'll just speak. Good evening. My name is Valerie Campbell. I'm a partner at the law firm of Kramer Levin, where I'm a member of the Land Use Department. I'm co-counsel with John Bennett and representing 88 Meadow Lane LLC with respect to the application for a certificate of appropriateness to demolish the existing house at 88 Meadow Lane. I have a joint degree in law and urban planning and have practiced land use law for over 30 years. My experience includes 4 years in the public sector as general counsel to the New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission. A significant portion of my land use practice is representing clients who are seeking landmarks approvals or advice. This is the first time I've appeared before a Landmarks Commission outside of New York City. However, I'm very familiar with Southampton Town and the village because I own a home in Shinnecock and I spend a lot of time there. My house was built in 1969 in the modern style, so it's a style that I do appreciate and value. In preparation for this hearing, I have reviewed the prior hearings on YouTube, reviewed the submissions to the board, conducted my own research, reviewed the Civic Visions report, and made several site visits. Based on this work, I have submitted a written memorandum to the board that sets forth the reasons why it is appropriate to demolish the existing house. I trust that the board has had time to review my memo or will have time, but I would like to summarize my main points here tonight. And then afterwards, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. It is undoubtedly ironic that the owners of 88 Meadow Lane are now required to fight as hard for its demolition as they did for its construction. Singled out for special scrutiny and subject to an unprecedented landscaping covenant in 1983, the owners now have to contend with an unexpected and unjustified mandate to preserve a highly altered building that has never been identified as a contributing resource in the Southampton Village Multiple Resource Historic District. Pursuant to Section 65(4) of the Village Code, a C of A is required for the demolition of any structure within a historic district. Section 65-4 goes on to note that a C of A is required for, quote, any material change in the appearance of such a property to the extent that it is visible from a public street, other rights of way or park, and which shall affect the appearance and cohesiveness of the historic district. The appropriateness standard utilized by the village is not unique and is found in many jurisdictions. It is not an ad hoc determination because appropriateness must be judged in relationship to the historic district. If a building does not contribute to the qualities that make a historic district special and unique, it should be appropriate to demolish it. Here, the contributing structures and the periods of significance of the historic district are clearly established in the nomination forms that were prepared by the village and submitted to the State Office of Historic Preservation in 1989 and 1993, and in the survey update prepared by the village's consultant in 2009. The village's own guidelines published in 2000 state clearly that the period of significance of the historic district spans the period from the 1640s to the 1940s. It is undisputed that 88 Meadow Lane was constructed in 1978 through 79 and substantially altered in 2000. There is no discussion of modern architecture as a significant style in the guidelines or in the nomination forms for the historic district or the survey update. The guidelines state that they are intended for use by the Board of Architectural Review, the Buildings Department, design professionals, and individual property owners within historic districts. Accordingly, the guidelines should provide the basis for the board's determinations. In my professional opinion, the importance of 88 Meadow Lane as a significant work of modern architecture and as an important example of Norman Jaffe's work has not been conclusively demonstrated or documented. The Civic Visions report finds that there's little evidence to support a finding that 88 Meadow Lane is a particularly noteworthy or significant modern building or even a good example of Norman Jaffe's work. Moreover, the board has approved the demolition of 2 houses designed by Norman Jaffe in the last 20 years. Even if 88 Meadow Lane had had significance as originally designed and built, its integrity was lost as a result of the alterations undertaken in 2000 that diminished its original character and style. As George noted, it has lost both its architectural integrity and the integrity of its site. The house also has numerous pragmatic deficiencies that cannot be easily remedied within the existing building envelope. FEMA regulations are an additional impediment to the extensive renovations that would be required to bring the houses up to the standards expected for houses at this location. Furthermore, given that the house's visibility is very constrained and that its immediate context is dominated by recently constructed houses, it is hard to see how its demolition would have any impact on the appearance and cohesiveness of the historic district as required under the village code. In recent years, the board has approved numerous demolitions of houses in the vicinity of 88 Meadow Lane. Notably, in 2003 and 2018, it approved the demolition of 2 houses designed by Norman Jaffe. The 2003 board approval stated simply that 170 Meadow Lane was not a contributing resource. The 2018 approval to demolish 210 Meadow Lane stated the building was not a listed resource, but represented a design of significance. However, the board still found that demolition was appropriate on the basis of unspecified significant structural, mechanical, and pragmatic deficiency, reasonably precluding efforts of preservation. The dicta in the board's approval to demolish 210 Meadow Lane on the grounds of appropriateness certainly does not establish a clear determination that henceforth a modern building could or would be considered to constitute a contributing historic resource in this historic district. The board has not cited any legitimate basis for treating 88 Meadow Lane differently from 170 and 210 Meadow Lane. It is a fundamental principle of land use law that regulations must adhere to the applicable legal framework and must be applied consistently and equitably. The board is to be commended for its stewardship of the village's historic districts and for the preparation of the guidelines to help property owners through the historic preservation review process. However, these guidelines, the nomination forms for the historic district, and the board's issuance of 2 prior certificates of appropriateness for the demolition of 2 other Jaffe houses in the historic district provide no justification for denial of a certificate of appropriateness to demolish 88 Meadow Lane. If the board wants to revisit the contributing styles and expand the period of significance of the historic district, it should do so in a comprehensive manner that allows for public input and an inventory and thorough analysis of every building that could be subject to reclassification as a contributing historic resource. It should not single out the Bliss House for treatment that is different from that of its neighbors. For all of these reasons, I respectfully submit that a denial of a certificate of appropriateness for the demolition of 88 Meadow Lane would be arbitrary and capricious. Accordingly, the board should examine the record, its prior determinations, and its own guidelines, and promptly issue the certificate of appropriateness for demolition. Thank you.
We have nothing else at this time other than to respond to any questions that you have.
Okay, so as I said when we began the meeting in this particular application, let's hear from our individual board members and provide them uninterrupted discourse and opportunity. Then I'll turn it back to you, John, Valerie, and Susan, and I'm sorry, George, to respond, and then we'll see if there's any public comment, and then we'll have a further discussion. So, board members, let's start with you, Peter.
Sure. I'm going to share my screen, please. Is that up for everyone to see?
Yes, Peter, it is.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Further on in section 8 in our guidelines, property setting is also listed as a criteria worthy of preservation. I know you concentrated on the dates of the houses that are in the guidelines, but section 8 in particular talks about property setting, and even underlined here, Meadow Lane along the beachfront. Urban design features are less important than the retention of natural foliage, flowers, and dunes, is of more importance in preserving the historic setting of the house and neighborhood. The guidelines very helpfully provided this caption, which you see here, of a typical Meadow Lane landscape 20 years ago. To the left is 88 Meadow Lane yesterday. It conforms in every way to that caption. It could have been photographed 20 years ago and it would be there. I maintain that it is a contributing structure because of its reticence, because it allows the landscape of Meadow Lane to predominate, and that together by happy happenstance with the house to the east, which you can see in the beach photograph, they're both examples of the sort of big roofed, low eaved, high gabled structures that is one tradition of dealing with building on the dunes. The slope of the dunes is picked up in the roof on the beach side, and on the Meadow Lane side, the landscape takes over. So I maintain that it's setting alone, and how it nestles into the site in a very sophisticated and now unusual way is worthy of preservation. I would also say that you showed the diagrams of the addition. I maintain that the addition, it starts at the center of the house, it extends eastward, it diminishes, the eave goes almost to the ground, and its mass is further diminished. Excuse me. Is further diminished by the void in the roof. As far as the garage goes, that is not shown on this diagram in front of you, but it is below the first floor level. It could be taken off. It would not harm the integrity of the building. That's one characteristic or desirable characteristic of an addition to a significant house. It is reversible. And I maintain that you could take off this roof, and I don't think, and you have the house back. I mean, you could demolish that, and the house would be intact. So between that and its setting, I think that it is worthy of saving. Also, I would say you showed, dozens of these Jaffe houses. all over the East End and elsewhere, I suppose. Southampton doesn't have that many anymore. You know, the board, the prior boards allowed those two buildings to be demolished in 2003, 2018. You know, since then, times change, reputations wax and wane. Since then, Jaffe's reputation has gained, modernism in general has gained, and I don't think that we should necessarily repeat a precedent that we would view at this time as injurious to our heritage. We're allowed to change. We don't have to follow precedents that were done in the past. Opinions evolve, boards evolve.
Thank you, Peter. Sarah?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the designation reports and the National Register nominations. These occurred in 1979 and they were adapted, as you said, in 1989. And that was a long time ago. And as you pointed out, but when the 1989 National Register nomination was ratified, for want of a better expression, the Bliss House was only 12 years old. So it wouldn't have been on anybody's wavelength, I don't believe. With reference to 170 Meadow Lane, the Marty Raines house, that was built in 1985 and was issued as C of A for demolition in 1903. Therefore, it was only 18 years old and not old enough in anybody's mind. The idea of linking the Norman Jaffe house to the greater East End doesn't wash either, I don't believe, because its importance in the village of Southampton, not the greater East End. And I believe that as a surviving and early building designed by Norman Jaffe, we should protect it. And I remember Dorothy Minor making it quite clear when I worked at the Landmarks Preservation Commission that applications were decided on a case-by-case basis. And I think we've grown up, and I think we recognize mistakes that were made. And I'm hoping to be able to retain this building as well. Thank you.
Thank you. John or Mark? Mark, you're not muted, so we'll let you speak first.
Okay, thank you. I do believe that this house makes a significant contribution to this historic district. And here's why. One of the reasons it's significant is because it was the first. It was the first Norman Jaffe in the Southampton along Meadow Lane, which as he became more famous based on this house, other projects came his way. He was hired, according to an article in the New York Times from December 21st, 1986, where Jaffe is quoted. He was hired because of work he had done in Amagansett by Mr. Bliss to build this house specifically for him. And then after this house was built, the controversy that it caused gives it significance because it ushered in a new style of homes being built on Meadow Lane that therefore theretofore had not been built. Therefore, it was controversial. I think the very controversy that it caused is what makes it significant. Therefore, because of the success of that, subsequent houses later on that he built were a result of the success of this house in the public opinion. Therefore, I think this house is significant in this community from an architect whose work was significant on the East End. And therefore, I would have a hard time supporting the certificate to tear it down.
Okay, thank you, Mark. John?
I would have to agree with my fellow board members. I think it is a significant structure. I think the additions that were made since it was originally built are not detrimental because they don't destroy the original integrity of the building. They could be removed, as Peter mentioned, and the original building would still be intact. And I think that because of the mistakes that were made in the past, so few of these examples remain. And this isn't so much about the architect's portfolio across the country or wherever he may have built homes. This is about Southampton Village. And for that reason, this particular building of this particular architect is a very important part of the historic, architecture and fabric of what currently exists in the village. So I would have to vote against demolition.
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to turn it back to you, John and Valerie and Susan and George, for you to respond to the board. Then I'm going to open it up for public comments. I'm not sure after all this much time whether there are any public members, but there had been a lot of public opposition previously. And then we'll make some final comments, and we may ask council to weigh in on certain elements. So anyway, John, Valerie, Susan, George, the floor is back to you.
Well, I can just handle a couple things here.
Sure.
Peter's citation of section 8 is, it's just, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but it's highly irrelevant. That talks about, that section has nothing to do with the structures. This is not a demolition that would do anything other than, we can't, by reason of the coastal erosion hazard setbacks, the dune crest setbacks, the other setbacks along the street, do anything other than remove the minimal amount of vegetation that would be necessary to demolish the house. There's no plan to do anything but that. And we can talk about, times have changed. You've got a line of cases, Knight versus Amelkin, a Rickenbacker case coming out of East Hampton. You're gonna have a very, 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 very difficult time distinguishing this case from a 2019 case. That's not a long time ago at all. And the mere fact that, this is something I struggle all the time with, but the mere fact that there have been some personnel changes are irrelevant to a judge looking at this. It doesn't matter. You have developed over the years your own body of, in effect, stare decisis. And personality changes, or personnel change, personnel changes on the board does not allow you to escape that. You may think of a mistake, but you have your own body of, in effect, stare decisis, administrative stare decisis, not only on this particular architect, but also in this very neighborhood. 2019 is not a long time ago, far from it. But primarily, or as difficult for anything for you to explain, is going to be the fact that this building, this style of architecture, has absolutely nothing to do with the reason for existence of the Southampton Historic District. And your own literature, compiled not only by the various applications before this board, the legislative history, your own action, the guidelines, et cetera, are really your worst enemy for trying to suggest that there's something in this application that warrants, under the framework, the existing framework, your own, in effect, case law, the trustees' actions, the studies that have been done, the guidelines yourself, is anything other than an arbitrary and capricious attack without foundation. If indeed you thought that this sort of architecture should come within the ambit of some sort of historic preservation in the guidelines within the boundary of the historic district, then it's incumbent upon the trustees to look at it again. But they can't look at it and hold up this applicant based upon the failure to do what it seems some of you want them to do, which is to explore styles of architecture that were created after 1949. Without part of a society where you can rely on things, part of a society where you can make decisions, part of a society that is structured and functional, is that you have to operate within the frameworks. You may not like the frameworks. You may have a different idea of what those frameworks should be, but there's a method for changing them. And this just does not wash with this application. I don't know, Valerie, I think it seems fairly clear to me that the attempt is to go outside of the well-established framework, not only via what the pronouncements of the trustees and the various experts that have weighed in on this Village Historic District itself have said, but in the board's own actions. I don't know if you have anything else to add, or Valerie?
No,
Or...
I mean, I think the only thing that I would just sort of add is someone who handles a lot of applications in historic districts. The first thing that I always do is look at how the historic district is described, what it was established to protect, and what decisions have been made by, in New York City, it's the Landmarks Preservation Commission, regarding buildings within the district. And a really important component is buildings have been altered, which this one certainly has. And just sort of based on the regulatory framework and how the historic district is described and how it's been regulated since its enactment, it seems to me, it does not seem to me rational that this building, particularly as altered as it is considered to be a contributing resource. If this building were demolished, it doesn't, if you look at the cohesiveness of it's the appearance and cohesiveness of the historic district, it would have no impact on the cohesiveness and appearance. Because in fact, when you look at this building from anywhere where it is visible from a public way, and it's not terribly visible from any public way, you don't see it in the context of any historic building. So I just, it really does not make sense to me from a regulatory standpoint. And I would also say that, its setting is something that could remain even if the building is, the house is demolished, and it could certainly remain if a new house, which would be subject to the board's approval, was constructed.
All right. Susan or George, do you want to say anything?
Yeah.
Okay.
One thought occurs to me, having looked at the way that historic districts are used in a sense as boundaries. And they are often created to resist change. And it's pretty clear that the date of this nomination and the date of the house are coincident and probably for a reason. In Philly, we did Society Hill so that we wouldn't have to protect and maintain all those Frank Furnace banks. And we regret it now that they took them all down. But the character of the nominations that were written in place, the DNA of your nomination is 1640 to 1950 with certain types of architecture, certain architects as what is protected and controlled. And again, as someone who has worked in this field forever, if you want to change that, you have to change your documents. You have to change the DNA of your control. And you can't just do it just by arbitrarily saying you want to do it. So to me, there's a critical point here. And the critical point is your documents tell you what you are protecting, as you have carefully handled up till now. Thanks.
Okay. Susan, I didn't want to leave you out. But you, okay. I think most of us, or many of us, are familiar with the notion of stare decisis if we've listened to the Supreme Court arguments in the last week or so. But in as much as that's been brought up, I'm going to ask Alice, our counsel, to weigh in on some of those issues and anything else that she feels is relevant. And then I will seek public comment, and then I will make a comment.
Sure. I'd like to start by stating that I did request an interpretation from the New York State SHPO office just to get some guidance on how the board should view this property, given that it is not 50 years old and does not meet the criteria for the National Historic Register generally. Certain exceptions can break that 50-year rule. I did receive a letter from the SHPO office. They point out that the goals are, chief among their goals are to enable local governments to understand and protect historic resources as a part of their unique sense of place. They point out that this board's review is under Chapter 65, as we know, and that the board should use the criteria listed in 65.5, specifically whether a building within the local historic district is significant and contributes to the district. I did want to address some of the precedent that was mentioned. I also wanted to, just point out some stuff that's in the local landmarker. I'll be quick about it. It talks a lot about the difference between, properties that are considered significant locally rather than statewide or nationally. It states local historic preservation is exactly that. It's local. A local preservation commission determines what is important to the municipality using that criteria in the local law, and it designates properties as such. I will point out that 210 Meadow Lane was affected by a mistake of law. It was not reviewed under this rule. The board actually believed that they were bound by the National Register criteria, found that they could not review that application because the house did not exist for 50 years. They actually stated that their jurisdiction did not allow for them to protect that house. They spoke extensively about how the property was important, how Norman Jaffe was significant, and how he was significant to Southampton Village. They also noted that Alistair Gordon, whose impartiality has been questioned tonight, submitted a letter to that file stating that 210 Meadow Lane was a spec house made of cheap materials. It was not Jaffe's best work, which I think speaks to his impartiality. They also submitted a report finding that that house was structurally unsound. With regard to 170, there's very little in that file. There wasn't even a written decision. However, if this board feels that was a mistake, they do not have to follow a mistake, certainly not a 20-year-old mistake. Jaffe's work was not cataloged until 2005. That COA was issued in 2003. In the report for 88 Meadow Lane, Alistair Gordon stated that the Bliss House did not lose its integrity, that the essential forms that gave the house its identity remained intact. The board can decide to defer to their own expert in a battle of the experts. And since Mr. Bennett quoted Knight v. Milken, I will note that that court stated that a board may refuse to duplicate previous error. It may change its views as to what is in the best interest of a municipality, and it may give weight to slight differences which are not easily discernible.
Thank you, Alice. Let me just open it up to public comment. Again, this has been out for a while. There was a lot of public comment earlier, both when we were in person and then through emails and letters. There were a lot of objections, both locally, regionally, and even some letters from Europe objecting to the possible demolition of this property. But Kat, if you want to see if anybody wants to say anything.
Okay, anybody in the attendee room, if you have a comment about this matter, please raise your hand. We're waiting on you. There are no hands up at this time, Jeff.
Okay, great.
And while I have you, I just wanted
Yes.
you to know that somebody did want adjournment for tonight.
Okay, we're going to, what we're going to do is after this, we'll give folks a chance to reconsider. I'm going to turn it back to you, John and Valerie. in particular, in as much as, there was some issues of law that you might want to respond. And then, like I said, I will make a couple of comments.
Yeah, we could deal with that in any litigation.
Okay.
I think what Alice, who's a good lawyer, is forgetting to mention is Knight versus American has an enormous amount of progeny, including some cases that I've litigated successfully. I don't know, Valerie, I don't know about you. We should ask the board to close the matter.
No, I think that's true. I mean, we set out, I think, in John's submissions and my submissions, what we believe is the correct standard and why it is arbitrary and capricious in this case for the board to deny the certificate of appropriateness. So I think we would sort of rest on our submissions and our testimony tonight.
Okay, well, we hear you. And so what I'd like to do.
So we'd like the matter closed.
Yes, I understand. And I said I would be making a comment, but just to your last point, Valerie, and as when I read through the code, there's been a lot of consideration of this case. And if time alone and the number of experts brought in, the amount of consideration, arbitrary and capricious would not be words that I would apply. If you choose to, at some point, make that claim, obviously that's your right under an Article of 78. And I feel very confident that that is not the case. What I'd like to do, Kat, if I can share my screen for a moment.
You sure can.
Okay, I press my button.
You do.
And then, thank you. And then let me go to this. Okay. Oh, and then I go to share. Okay.
You got it.
Okay, now I'm going to go to a slideshow from the beginning. Okay, so much as has been said about visibility in the historic district. And so I'd like to take you on a little walking tour. Valerie, you made some statements that were rather absolute in their nature, that property wasn't visible from the public way, its visibility was constrained, it would have no impact at all, it's not visible from a public way. Well, Southampton, as you know, is renowned for its beach. Its beach has been its claim to fame. It is very much a public way. And that's been supported in cases, even those worked on with current council here. It's very much a public way, and the house in the middle, which is very clear, is very visible and very much a part of the public way and very much a part of the fabric and very much flows into the dunes, very much the way Mr. Bliss had wanted and the way Mr. Jaffe designed the house. And hold on a second, let me just go back. I might have gone too fast. Oh, bummer. Okay. Let me just make sure that, oh, now I'm the challenged. Okay, let's see if we go here. Let's take a walk along the beach. Now this is from my eye level. Valerie, you don't know me, John does. I'm a whopping 5'5", standing erect. So this is nobody's on stilts. This is eye level. And so we're walking from east to west. There's the house. You saw the panoramic before. You see how it floats into the dunes as we walk east to west. Now we're coming abeam the house. It flows into the dunes just the way it was designed to be. And it continues its flow, it's into the dune. It's very much a part of it. And then we walk on, just so smooth and elegant. And just, I'm done with that. So let me stop my screen share. So it is very much visible. It's very much a part of the community. It's very much a part of the historic district. And it's hard, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, it's hard to come up with as many words to say not. Let me share with you the codes that guide us. George had made some statements to that effect. And there are codes, George, that do guide us, and they guide us quite well. And we're well within our purview to make a judgment as we are and doing, and it's hardly capricious or arbitrary. 65.1, the protection, enhancement, and perpetuation of landmarks and historic districts are necessary to promote the economic, cultural, educational, and general welfare of the public. As Southampton has many historic, architectural, and cultural resources which constitute its heritage, this chapter is intended to. Now, it doesn't make the distinction of architectural within a certain time frame. It's architectural. It stands on its own. 65.1a, to protect, this chapter is intended to protect and enhance landmarks and historic districts. C, foster civic pride in the accomplishments of the past. It doesn't say what the past is. It doesn't relegate it to a certain number. And 65.1d, to protect and enhance the village's attractiveness to residents and to visitors. I just shared with you pictures of our most important asset, the beach, and how this house fits into that. It's a valuable asset and it's attractive to both residents and visitors. 65-3, designation of landmarks and historic districts. The board may designate an individual property as a landmark, and this is what usually guides us for protecting houses. The board may designate an individual property as a landmark if it possesses special character or historic or aesthetic interest or value as part of the cultural, political, economic, or social history of the locality, region, state, or nation. We spoke a lot about the importance of this house to this community. It is. And we also spoke about the fact, and we can debate, we're talking about this house, but Jaffe is of renown, international renown. Again, we got letters from Europe to protect this house. 65.3a4. Again, I'll repeat the preamble. The board may designate an individual property as a landmark if it is the work of a designer whose work has significantly influenced an age, or 5, because of unique location or singular physical characteristic represents an established and familiar visual feature of the neighborhood. The criteria for approval of certificate of appropriateness, 65.5. So the board's decision to approve or disapprove shall be based upon the following principles. And again, it's a matter here of using judgment, which is again, counter to being arbitrary and capricious. The board's decision to approve or disapprove shall be based upon the following: features or properties which make significant contribution to the character of a landmark or historic district shall be altered as little as possible. Well, obviously, demolition is a significant alteration. It's the ultimate alteration. Any alteration of an existing feature of property shall be compatible with its historic structure. Well, once you destroy a house, there's nothing to be compatible with. And finally, the importance of features or property to be changed to the historic, architectural, culture, or significance of the property shall be done as little harm as possible. Anyway, so what's the situation here? We are looking at a property at this time. And architecture, like works of art, they grow into their history. I'm a fan of Fitzgerald. When he wrote what he thought was the great American novel, The Great Gatsby, he sold all of 3,000 copies. Okay, it wasn't until nearly 20 years after his, nearly 20 years after his death that it truly came into its own as the great American novel. Frank Lloyd Wright's houses, some people called them monstrosities when they were first built. Now we value them. So architecture grows, times change, people become prominent, houses become important, history evolves. This is surely a property that fits the criteria outlined in the code for landmarking and preservation, which makes significant contribution to the character of the historic district. And again, it shall be altered as little as possible. It is the work and one of the best of a notable architect of world renown and recognition. Any alterations that were made have been respectful of Jaffe's design and theory by people who were students of his and followed his lead. And again, as Peter demonstrated, they are consistent. They are everything that Jaffe intended to do, to float into the dunes, to become a part of it. And it's still visible from our most important public way. It's a beautiful structure that was designed to reflect and to fit into its environment, which it does. And it does so again at the beach, which is most important. The comparisons, as Sarah has pointed out, to the other properties are not relevant in this case. Again, we're looking at this property at this time. So I agree with my fellow board members that this house is one to be preserved, and the request for a certificate of appropriateness to demolish it, in my view, should be denied. So I will go recognize John and Valerie's request to draw this to a close. Alice, subject to your advice, I will make a motion that we move this to written decision with the boards with the intent to deny the C of A, if that's the proper wording. And if so, then I would look for a second. Are we good with that, Alice?
That sounds fine to me. I got the gist.
Okay. So I have a second. Is that, do I have a second? Is that you? John? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. That's everyone. That's unanimous. So I thank everybody for the time. And as is required, Alice, do you want to, just so Valerie, who's less familiar than John is with the process, can you explain what follows?
We should have a written decision at our next meeting. Hopefully I'll get to it over the holidays, and I can send John a copy. He can share it with you. And hopefully the board can adopt it at the next meeting.
Right. Now, our next meeting currently officially is January 10th. We do have a possible supplemental meeting, which is to address the overflow here. So let's make sure that we're talking dates.
Yes, I will not have it on December 28th. That won't happen.
Okay. And am I correct, Alice, that we have 30 days in which to submit a written decision?
Correct.
Okay. All right. So everybody clear on that? We're all good? All right. All right. Well, I thank everybody for their time. Valerie, Susan, George, and of course, John. So thank you very much. And we will move on to the next application.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night. To all of those listening, as you can see, we're now an hour and 20 minutes into this meeting. And we are only through the second app. Let me get my agenda, but okay. Yeah, that was only the second of 27 applications. So again, I put it forward to anybody listening there. that,
Can you remove everyone who's not a part of the current discussion from a board perspective, please?
okay. Well, Kat, can you, okay,
Yeah, we got an adjournment request from 27 Gin Lane. So I
Let me-
suggest that you open that and we can take jurisdiction. I've received affidavits of noticing and posting.
okay, so this is, let me just get to it.
It's number 10 on the
Yep,
agenda.
yep.
Historic.
So in as much as we have, so you want me to actually call it or?
Yeah, if you could just call it
Yeah,
and
so
take
this
jurisdiction.
is calling the application of 27 Gin Lane LLC at 27 Gin Lane to construct an addition. Do they have to present themselves or? They
No, they don't have to. We received the affidavits of posting and noticing. They've requested an adjournment to the next meeting on December 28th.
Okay, so I move that we accept the applicant's request to adjourn to the 28th. Do I have a second on that?
Okay.
Good, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Again, anybody else out in the ether that wants to take us up on that offer to meet on the 28th?
Jeff, I don't see any hands up yet, but I'll wait a few seconds.
Okay, people may decide as they go along. Okay, well, let's proceed. We now have, in fact, though, let me, while you're waiting, let me just put my files back in order. Okay. Okay, hold on a second.
Guess this is not the proper place to be silly. I get a little whippy at night. How about you guys? Nice.
Okay, the next application is Beechwood Latch LLC, 109 Hill Street, to construct a pergola and pool house. Is the applicant here or anybody representing them?
There's a David Gilmartin coming in and Stephen Dubb.
Okay,
And Kat, I think this is one of the ones where you didn't have the plan, so maybe they can share theirs. It's really just a one pager.
Okay, we will find out when they come in. Thanks, Alice.
You're welcome.
I wonder if we had it previously. Let me just go to my files and see if I have.
Okay. David Gilmartin is in, so is Stephen Dubb. Hi,
Okay,
Stephen, you
Hold
have
on.
to unmute to talk.
David and
Hello.
Stephen, just hold on 1 second. I just want to check my files to see if I have.
I don't think so, Jeff. It was submitted November 30th.
Oh, okay, right. I don't then. Okay, gentlemen, tell us who you are, who you're representing, and then we'll proceed.
Sure. Stephen Dubb from Beechwood Latch LLC, the applicant, 200 Robbins Lane, Jericho, New York.
Okay,
And David Gilmartin. Oh, there you are. Go ahead.
David Gilmartin of the law firm Farrell Fritz, 50 Station Road, Watermill, New York, and I'm counsel to Beechwood.
okay. So whichever one of you want to make the presentation, go right ahead.
Sure thing. So in general, what we're talking about tonight is some changes to the landscape plan for the Terry Cottage lot.
Well, it's changes to the landscape plan, or you're looking to build a structure? They're two different things from our perspective.
Well, additions to the landscape plan that you approved in 2019. And does a pergola count as a structure in your mind?
Yep.
Okay, then yes.
Sure,
looking to
we're
build a
talking-
structure.
Okay.
Can you
Okay,
share your
and-
screen, please, if you have pictures?
I sure can. Give me
Thank
one
you.
moment to just figure it out.
Sure. And is John McNeil with you, fellas, or do we? not know that.
Now, I have on the application to construct a pergola and a pool house.
I think the pool house was withdrawn, but I don't want to overstep.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Okay. Okay,
So I just wanted to start by showing you the landscape plan that was approved originally back in 2019.
okay. And just, yep, and that does not show a pool.
No, I mean, other than just for clarity purposes, the pool that was there, that was pre-existing us coming in.
Where's that?
It's towards the back of the lot. Do you see the grade line that says 35? I'm not sure if you can see my cursor.
Yeah, we can see your cursor.
That's the pool right there.
Oh, wait, I can't see your cursor. Where is the pool? Oh, back
Look-
there.
look
Okay.
towards the lower right.
Yeah, I got you.
You got it?
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yep, okay.
Okay, what I'm going to share next,
Now, does that pool still exist?
no, that pool was demolished.
Okay.
And a new pool.
Any pool in that area?
Yes, there's a new pool. So what I'm about to bring up shows our current plan.
Okay,
Are you able to see this new plan?
yeah,
Okay, so this shows the additions to the originally approved plan. I'll run you through them. So in light green here, are you able to follow my cursor?
Yes.
This is additional privet hedge. And then we have additional landscaping here. It's a mix of Nepeta, Shipka laurel, and some cypress trees and some low flowers in front of this pool fence area and then behind the pool fence area. This is the new swimming pool. This is the pergola, 17 feet by 17 feet. And then there's an outdoor barbecue kitchen area. What's shown surrounding the pool, the pergola, and the outdoor kitchen is bluestone patio. The rest of it is grass. And then I will show you highlighted here. These are the additions to the landscape plan.
mhm, okay. Okay, and what's being planted?
So you can see here, Nepeta, PLS is the Shipka laurel. COG is a cypress. I got to refer back to the original plan. Would you like me
And
to pull it up?
what's the planted height and intended height?
Excuse me 1 second, and I will tell you.
No, okay, if it's on there.
Yeah, it's on the plan. I just have to find it.
Yeah, also you need a pair of magnifying glass to read it.
Let me see. It may be, yeah, I think maybe easier to find here.
Yeah, no, I see it.
Okay.
You're basically talking 6 and 7 foot plants, is that it?
That's correct.
Okay, okay. All righty, continue, I'm sorry.
In terms of the pergola, I've got to pull it up. Give me 1 moment.
No.
This sketch just shows the 17 foot by 17 foot dimensions. And I have a photo. Let's see. You know what? I'm going to stop sharing. When I find it, I will reshare.
Sure.
Got a photo of what the pergola will look like.
Mhm.
Okay, here we go.
Do we have a plan of the pergola in our file? Was that previously submitted?
I believe so.
It was at some point, if unless it's changed.
Okay.
Okay, are you able to see this?
Yes.
So this is a photo of the same construction taken from another site. So ignore the setting. And that is all I have to show you.
So, all right, let's get out of that. And, all right, so I'm dealing with a dog here. So I don't know if all of my fellow board members were involved in this application when it was first heard. No. So let me put it into a little bit of context. And this sort of picks up after what you were saying, Stephen. Ignore the landscape around the pergola. In this case, we cannot. The reason being, these are two properties, the Terry House in particular, actually both, of deep historic context and nature. When the application was first heard a few years back, and I can't recall, Stephen, I think you were on the case, there was a lot of discussion about the historic aspects of both the main house and the Terry House in particular. There was a lot of attention paid to restoring the historic integrity of that house, even to the point of sheds, whether there was an addition that was put on, that was taken back to restore it and everything else, and all of which was to maintain that historic property in the context of all the other stuff that was going on behind it. So now you're coming before us with a structure that I doubt existed when the Terry House was first built, and is very counter to the historic nature. So obviously I'm showing you where my thinking is, but I just want the context is there was an inordinate amount of attention to historic detail and a excruciatingly amount of detail and attention and interest in maintaining the historic integrity. So,
I do remember that, Chairman, and I agree it was an excruciating process. I was there.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So in any event, that's a bit of the history. I'm going to turn it over to my fellow board members. I'm going to go on mute for a second. I'm dealing with a dog that has to go out, but I'm doing my best to maintain my cool. So I'm going to go on mute for a second here. But go ahead.
Chairman, if I may ask you, is the issue with the landscaping or with the pergola, because we were advised by the building department that we did not need to go before ARB for an open air pergola?
That's incorrect.
I just did, so I would say that's incorrect, yes.
Okay.
I have a question, Sarah, before you start, because you were part of this, and that's why I want to
No,
ask.
I wasn't.
Oh, you weren't? Okay.
I'm just going to add one more thing. In regard to historic properties, even the pool should, in my view, should have come before the board. So,
Yes.
But Alice is shaking her head. There's a bit of an opinion on that, so maybe I should shut up. But in any event, but the pergola definitely is something. So never mind.
Mm-hmm.
But my question is about the landscaping plan overall. Jeff, as a part of the original plan discussion approvals, I assume, not knowing, that part of the idea was to preserve the view of both of these historic properties from the street.
Yes.
And since, there have been these big evergreens planted across both properties that completely obstruct the view of both homes. I'm just curious.
Guys, if you don't mind me cutting you off.
No, Stephen.
I'm just asking a question.
Let me cut it off because I did go back to the original plan and they were on there. Right, Stephen?
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. Whether that was an error on the board's part, quite possibly. But, they were on the original plan, so.
Well, that would be my comment as far as this is concerned,
Right.
that any additional landscaping further obstructs view of what is probably two of the most historic buildings in the village because of the architect and the provenance of that architect. So that's
I don't think I can show you what we.
Would you let us finish, please?
So here's what we're going to do. We're going to hear from the board. We're going to do exactly what we did with the first application. We're going to hear from the board. We'll give it back to you guys, and then we'll go from there. Okay? Go. Board members, fellow board members, Sarah?
My turn.
Go, Sarah.
I wasn't around during this, but in looking at it, it appeared to me that what was originally approved was a buffer, the equivalent of a green buffer between the Terry Cottage and then the larger scale. In my opinion, even though the Alice maintains that a pool doesn't count, that's not part of a green buffer. And I would clearly be against a pergola and the cookout section. But the pergola, I think, really is a unnecessary addition. And if I'd been around during the buffer conversation, I think I also would have talked about the pool, because there is in my understanding, there is a pool for the larger project.
This isn't
What's that?
This isn't site plan review. You can't say whether or not someone can have a pool.
Yeah, I think, and we can take this.
Okay, all right, fine. I was just thinking.
But I know in regard to some other historic properties, when they were redoing construction on the site, there was the whole issue of landscaping. But again, we'll do that offline. Let's assume at the moment the pool is there. Find out that it was done illegally. We can deal with it at that point. But let's deal with the pergola. And what I heard you saying, Sarah, is that you think it's inappropriate in terms of historic context.
Yes.
And the fireplace.
The fireplace also chaches it up.
Right, hardly something that would date back to the 1700s or 1800s when the house was built.
Can I just say, there's no fireplace on
No,
the plan.
let the other folks speak if they want to.
Yeah, but Jeff, he was
Have to
saying
get the facts.
photo
right?
with the fireplace, that fireplace is not proposed.
There's,
He was just showing you a picture of the pergola.
Oh, okay, all right.
It's the pergola.
Thank you, sorry. Okay.
Yeah, there's no fireplace there.
Okay,
It's a U-shaped kitchen.
okay, all right, great. I stand corrected. Thank you, gentlemen. So Mark, Peter, John, any other comments?
I'm a little confused.
I'd rather not see a pergola. I mean, I understood the point was to have a green buffer. And then are those bushes gonna, around the pool, are they gonna stay 7 feet, or are they gonna get tall and reduce the buffer? I mean, what's the intent of the plantings at the pool fence?
is that something I should answer?
Well, somebody who knows.
Yeah,
how,
okay, go ahead. You asked a direct question.
20 feet, want to be 6 feet.
Sorry, Steve.
The intent would be that they'd be maintained at roughly the height they were planted at, as most landscaping is.
Yeah, but you know, the fact
It's not definitive, though.
it can't be monitored. It can't be monitored.
You're rolling your eyes at our questions just really doesn't help resolve any issue.
Sir, with all due respect, how are you going to guarantee that nobody is ever going to?
No.
That's what I just said. I said that
What
it's
can I
not
say?
definitive. No matter what you say, we can't control the height of those bushes. So
Yeah, and I'm agreeing with you. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to roll my eyes.
Yeah, okay.
It's inappropriate.
All right, Mark, did you have anything to comment?
Yeah, could you do me a favor and pull up the original plan one more time and screen share? it?
Sure.
Good.
So what we're looking at is you want to you're putting a whole row of plants between yourself and the first condo that's on the other side, townhouse that's on to the whatever side that is.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
Yes.
but then you want to put a second row of planting to ostensibly, if you're in the house, block having to see the pool and the pergola from the house of the people that are buying the house. So what I find odd is that you have to go completely to the other side of the pool to this pergola, which I think probably should have come in front of us, but I don't mind the plants across the back by the townhouse, but I think dividing the property into effectively two looking properties takes away from the spirit of the open space and provides a nice, for the owner of the property, a buffer to see their own pool in the winter. But you're also chopping the property up so much with that line in the middle that we've lost the openness of the space that was there. And I will say, I know we're not doing site approval, but this very specifically shows the removal of the existing pool, but it didn't show. What we've done is push things as far away from the house as possible without making them cohesive to the house themselves. So that middle line of shrubs, I think, breaks the property into two properties instead of one. So the back to me is fine, but not the middle.
I agree, Mark.
I agree.
Sorry.
That wasn't me barking.
I'm sorry. I may have to excuse myself for a few minutes and turn the chair over. But in any event, well, let me see if there's any public comment. Any public comment?
Jeff, there's no hands up.
Okay, so I think it's fair to say, gentlemen, the consensus of the board is that there's not strong support for the pergola. There's even concern about the very landscaping. So I don't know. We could vote on it this evening in terms of moving it to a written decision.
And can I comment before?
Or you want to come back with a adjournment? Go ahead, David.
A couple of things. It was suggested, and I've been holding my tongue out of respect, but it's been suggested that the board has control over the pool, and the code specifically says that that's accepted from this board's review. It's 11632B. I'd also note that Stephen and I met when I had hair that was his color. It's now gray when we started this process. And so I have the benefit of the history of this lot, which had a pool, which was basically located on the property line that separated the two properties. There was a lot of discussion with the different boards in the village as we went through the process of whether the Terry lot was a part of the greater Latch lot. And it was ultimately determined, I think it was the zoning board, Stephen, correct me if I'm wrong, but the zoning board was the one that determined that they were two separate lots and that the Terry cottage would be treated as its own separate single-family dwelling. We were able to, because your comp plan says to reduce the number of access ways, to create one access, and the Terry cottage got an easement to allow access into the property. I believe what's happening here is that Stephen is trying to create some sort of privacy from the lot that's behind it, and then from the entryway, which drives basically right alongside the pool. So the back and the side are really privacy issues. As you all must know, pools and pool enclosures are very important health safety issues for municipalities and especially building departments. What the planting in front or the one that's been said to chop up the lot is to basically screen the fence. So if there are issues with that, you know, I think maybe we can talk about what kind of plantings are there and keep them low level. But, you know, most of the properties that I see or deal with in the village have that screening in front of a fence to create a nicer look for it. And I think that's what we're looking to do here.
All right. So we've got the pergola, and then we've got the pool and the related plantings. Let's do the simple thing on the pergola, which is, I don't think there's broad support among the board for a pergola. Am I putting words into anybody's mouth? Okay.
correct.
So then we're talking about the pool. So David, the logic of what you're putting forward doesn't work. One, it doesn't work on two counts. One, when this was presented to the board, yes, they were legally two separate lots, but if I had to go back to the tapes, I can assure you, it was with a recognition that this was a single development that happened to have two lots. Okay, now, if you also look at the shake your head, but I was there. So David, I was there. It's going to be a long night.
You were not at the zoning
Argument.
board, which is what I was quoting. So when you say I'm wrong, you weren't quoting the right
Okay,
place that we
I'm
were.
speaking.
And it was a very important point during that hearing, because, you know, if we got pre-existing non-conforming rights on the Terry Cottage,
Okay.
it would have changed how this was developed. So I am right.
Okay, you're right. As you appeared before the zoning board, you are now before the architectural review board. And at that meeting, your clients presented this as a brother and sister property, all a part of one presentation, but two separate applications. All right, so we're both right. I grant you that. Now, Stephen started the presentation by showing the original landscape. The original landscape plan did not have a pool in that spot. It had an existing pool. So you've created a situation where which one wasn't initially approved, and now asking for the board's consideration and allowance of something that wasn't part of the original discussion, and putting it under the context and requirements that you put a pool there. Well, you know, if we had addressed that then, you know, maybe the discussion would have been different, but it's not. And it wasn't approved then. Whether this board has the jurisdiction over a pool on a property, there's some debate about that. I'll accept for the moment. We're not arguing about the pool. We're talking about the pergola and how you choose to landscape it. The pergola is not going to get a certificate of approval. The landscaping plan, if you've got to put in a, you know, I think I'd like to find out about the pool issue, Alice, offline, but I really don't know at this point what we're going to be voting on.
I'd also like to raise the point of the amount of
Alice, you want to help me out here?
I was deferring to Sarah.
Oh, go ahead. Go, Sarah.
Oh, no, I was just going to raise the point that there's also a lot of hardscape that would not have been part of the historic fabric. If you look at the amount of bluestone that's called out around the area, is also, and there's just a teeny bit of grass and a big hunk of bluestone, which does not create a green buffer.
Yeah. Yeah, my own view, and I'll look for advice from Alice, but I'm almost tempted to make a board request for an adjournment while we sort out some of these issues, but I don't know if that's appropriate or not. Alice, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I am.
No, I don't even know what you're asking me. I'm happy to review the prior file, but you know, if the board wants to see changes in the landscape plan, they should ask for them. If the board is not inclined to grant the request for the pergola because this is a property that makes a significant contribution to the character of the historic district. It's also, I think it's a landmark. I know it's a contributing structure and it should be altered as little as possible. I think we're clear on that. So maybe David wants to ask for an adjournment. I don't know.
Yeah, so without the pergola, again, maybe that's the point. If we deny the C of A for the pergola, do you want to submit a different plan for the landscaping?
Why don't we, if it's okay with you, Chairman, let's adjourn to the next meeting. And
Yeah, I think that makes sense. You guys think about it. And look, if you want to confer with us, with Alice or me, I mean, Alice, I'm good with that. I mean, at the end of the day, guys, we want this property to be everything that it can be. So, and if there are open issues in terms of authority, and I think we should clear that up.
I'll pull the prior determinations, but I probably won't have them for the December 28th meeting.
No, we won't be ready for that. So let's accept your adjournment, and let's both think about where we go from here. Okay.
I would just be curious whether the original landscape plan that was provided reflects what's there now.
Yeah, I believe it does.
Just asking the question. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Good point. So I move that we accept the applicant's request to adjourn to the next meeting, or the one on the 10th?
Yeah, January 10th, right?
Yeah, January 10th. Okay. All right, guys.
Okay, thank you all.
Do I have a second on that?
Second.
Okay, second by John had his hand up first. All in favor, aye.
Right.
Aye.
Okay, great. Hey, thanks. And I'm sorry if we got a little testy there. All right, thanks, guys. Okay, thank you.
I have a hand up, John Bennett.
Yes.
Find out what he wants.
I'm assuming he's for the next application, which is NH LLC.
Okay. Well, he's in.
I think I'm on the next one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Fine.
Yeah, hold on a second, John. Let me put this here.
Was John McNeil with you, John Bennett?
No, it should be John Grew and Mike Benacasa.
Okay, are they out there?
I am looking. I see him. I see one. I got the
John
one.
Grew might come in under Coral Brothers.
No, he's John Grew.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next application is BHNH LLC, 109 Hampton Road, to amend a prior approval. And so we see John represent. John, again, tell us who you are and who you represent. And if whoever else is going to be speaking, they may as well do the same.
Okay, my name is John Bennett, and I'm from Bennett and Reed, 212 Windmill Lane, Southampton, New York, and I represent the applicant. And John, if you can identify yourself.
John Grew declined to come in, but there are
Okay.
two more people.
No, that doesn't make sense.
Then he pressed the wrong button. I'll try
Must
again.
have pressed the wrong button. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's possible. John McNeil is coming. Oh, he declined. Okay.
All right. Well,
All right, well,
okay, well, they can come in. So let me
if you can
just.
get them in, yeah.
Hey,
so-
John,
There we go.
okay, John Grew, tell us who you are.
So what I wanted to do.
Hey, John, can.
Oh,
can I
sure.
just-
Sorry. I'm sorry, Jeff. Sorry.
So John Grew and John McNeil, when you guys speak, you can tell us who you are. But I just wanted to preface this with a statement that at our last meeting, we brought up issues of violations against the original approval. And I want to separate that, which is an enforcement action between the builder and the building department, versus what we hear tonight, which is strictly the amendment to the prior approval. So, okay.
Well, that's
I don't want to
fine.
conflate the two.
No, that's actually fine. We were prepared to explain what were thought to be discrepancies, despite the fact that the building isn't finished yet, so it's hard
Right,
to do
right.
that.
Yeah,
But
now that doesn't.
I'm glad to hear you're going to leave that with the building department.
Right, now that doesn't preclude, if there are any violations or that relate specifically to your request, then that's appropriate. But it's about the
understand.
eaves and all the other stuff. No, okay.
I understand.
Anyway, it's over to you, John. John Bennett, that is.
Yes, no, I understand. I
Okay.
understand. So this is essentially a legal presentation. We did submit to the board back on December 9th our interpretation of the building code sections and how they relate to historic structures. And we also did with some photographs. And we did also submit to you an affidavit of Mike Benacasa, who was a building inspector for 25 years and the chief building inspector for the town of Southampton for 18 years. And not, of course, talking about village code sections, but how state building code sections and the like. And the sum and substance of it, because it's such an inherent safety issue, what we're talking about is the proposed dormer over these very low set of stairs. Hey, Mike, the sum and substance of it, is you have a set, there are certain sections of the relevant building codes that you get a buy on if you are reconstructing to the extent that you are here, we are here, which is a phased, it's a stage 2 type of reconstruction, as we've laid out in our correspondence and our citation. There are certain building code sections that you get, in effect, a buy on if it's a historic structure. However, there are certain sections of the code that you do not get relief from. And understandably, one of those is the headroom sections in a stairway. And that makes a lot of sense because it's a significant health and safety issue. At one point, when this hearing was first heard, someone sort of, I don't know whether it was tongue in cheek, said, well, you know, get used, you duck your head there and you're going to hit your head sometimes and then you remember. Well, that's actually not the way the state code directs you, because it's a significant safe and healthy issue, not only for the occupants of the house, but for emergency folks. One of the reasons you need that headroom, amongst other things, is carry stretcher down the stairs. These are people coming into the house who don't live there, who shouldn't expect to encounter low headrooms. And, you know, I understand that your focus is historic review, but it doesn't trump everything. So we have laid out for you in very specific chapter and verse the fact that on a level 2 alteration, amongst the things that have to be adhered to is sufficient height for egress. And this is egress from the first floor to the second floor. And the headroom in the stairway is supposed to be 6.8 inches at a minimum. And as we've demonstrated to you, it's only 6'2". You know, whether or not the stairs were there or removed or have to go back or going to be reconstructed, it doesn't matter, because when you have a level 2 alteration, it was required under the state building code to make the headway work. The only way it works is to allow that dormer above the stairways. You know, again, I understand that your focus is historic preservation, and that's what you think about most of the time. It doesn't trump everything. And in this particular instance, because it is such a significant safety issue, the authors of the code, who are obviously long qualified building code and safety experts, have said, we're not going to give you a buy on this one. It's too important. So it really drives what we have to do here. Has to have it. There's no other way to achieve it other than to put a dormer over that stairwell.
John, in as much as you couch this as a legal issue, let me turn it over to our counsel and your fellow Brooklynite, Alice Cooley.
Well, I think I'd like to think that Alice and I wouldn't be described as Brooklynites. We did go to Brooklyn Law School. We're old East End types, make no mistake about that.
I'm from Queens.
Still part of Long Island, I guess.
All right. I don't know what the Brooklyn Law mascot is, so that's as close as I could get. Anyway,
No sports there, just
turn
study.
it over to Alice for the moment.
Okay, so I don't have an eloquent response, John, unfortunately. I understand your argument. It makes sense to me, but I was not able to find any clear case law on this. And that might very well be because it's so obvious. Why don't I see it? So I have requested guidance from the state. And I ask that you give me time to receive that guidance, because right now I cannot advise the board that you are correct or incorrect. And I would like to do that.
Well, as long as the request is made to the appropriate state officials, my experience has been that if you ask the New York State Department of Historic Preservation, they're going to be the answer that they think is right, which does not necessarily what the people like Mr. Smith in the state code provisions, which is really where the question should be asked, will answer you. I mean, I haven't had, I find the people in historic preservation in the state to be essentially goal-oriented. So if I could simply ask you that the question would be put to the state code people, which is, I think his name is Smith. Mike, what's
Richard Smith.
Richard Smith.
So what, we'll sort that out.
I did already put in a request to the Historic Preservation Office.
Yeah, I think they're worthless.
Okay,
as it
so-
relates to
so
that. Hold
we
on,
can-
let me finish. Let me finish.
Yeah.
Let me finish.
I can ask
please.
both.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's what I was going to
The
suggest.
historic preservation people have absolutely, officially or unofficially, no right telling anybody what the state code says, the state building code.
So let's switch it out of the legal room into one of that deals with the practicality of what this board is dealing with on an administrative basis. And so I'd like to turn it over to Peter for a second, and then my fellow board members, and then I'll make a comment as well.
Well, as far as the stair goes, why can't you relocate it on the interior?
Because it's a very small house and you have no interior control.
No, that's not,
That's
no,
my
but,
answer.
no, but you're asking us to make an exterior change to an historic property, which could be accommodated by an interior change.
There's no,
Okay?
that's out of your
Okay,
jurisdiction.
you know, let's do this. Again, because we have such a long night, let's hear all the board members, including myself, and then John, you can rebut. We're going to be going to an adjournment anyway, so
Ask me a question.
let's hear the board and then go from there. So Peter, go ahead.
That's my point. You can move the stair. I'd also point out that, you know, when you sistered the new rafters, new joists to the roof rafters, you used dimensional lumber, which was deeper than the original rafters. You didn't have to use 2 buys. You could have used 3 buys. And so, so in a sense, you made it, you lost 2 inches. It was 6'4", perhaps. Now it's 6'2". Maybe
Yeah,
it's
I wasn't going to be built on I wasn't.
Okay,
gonna be
okay, guys,
built
I want to keep the flow going. Peter, is that your comments?
Well, yeah, either move the plan. I mean, it's too late to reframe, but at this point, move the stair. Start at one tread to the west.
Can I comment to that?
No, afterwards.
Afterwards,
No,
John.
John, I'm going to be here all frickin' night. All right, so just cooperate with me, all right?
You got it.
Thank you. Sarah? Oh, you're on mute, Sarah. Go ahead, Sarah. Oh, Sarah, you're still on mute. There you go.
I still agree that a tread removal would accommodate everything. And if this was the plot all along, the rafters themselves the original lumber is better lumber for the most part than what has been added. And so I think you've had a year to invoke this, and it could have been worked out before you got so far along. So that's my comment.
That's contrary to
John, please. Mark, I'm just trying to keep order, John, that's all.
Quickly, I'm going back.
Nothing against you.
I'm going back to the original drawings.
Yeah.
Your solution doesn't solve your problem because even in this drawing where you have a dormer, at the top step, he still smacks his head on the corner before he makes the right-hand turn.
The measurement is made from the center of the plan.
You're not up yet.
Okay.
Over
All
here,
right.
over here is where you see the stairs going up. Those stairs go up. There's a landing. You turn to the left and you go up 2 more steps. If you look at your drawing, there was room to lower that landing by 1, if not 2 steps before you made the left-hand turn, which would have bought you the ceiling height you needed to go into that landing on the 2nd floor without putting a rafter into the space. Now that's based on the drawings that you guys gave us. So I feel like in this case, there is an internal solution here that works without completely redesigning the staircase, just by lowering the landing by 2 steps and having more steps going up. It may take up a little bit of your landing, but there was an internal solution here that did not involve having to reopen the roof to the east side. That's
John Gregory.
My point of view on this property has been very well documented over the past year. So I've been the dissenting vote for many things in this property. So
Okay.
I defer.
All right, and let me make my comment, and then John Grew, will have the floor, and we will not interrupt you. So there's a certain logic to what you're putting forward, John Bennett, from the standpoint, the applicant bought an historic house. They agreed to keep it as an historic structure and not to put on dormers. They, in essence, created their own situation and problem, as Peter said, and applying the code as you would sort of render any historic house from preserving its historic structure. Because if every historic house had was remodeled to meet current codes, what historic houses would be left? What historic integrity would there be? So again, simple logic from my standpoint, you bought a house that had a certain roof line, that had certain characteristics. We approved, and it was agreed by the applicant to maintain the roof, to actually maintain the framing. There was really no agreement to change it, but be that as it may, they did. And whether that was needed or not, it is what it is. But as Peter said, the choice of materials created this situation. You're asking us to approve an exterior change for something that has an alternative solution and can still maintain the historic property. So it would not get my vote. So John Grew, I'm going to turn it back to you, and John Bennett can make his arguments heard too. And I'm going to try to keep this little puppy from biting off my hand. Okay.
So I'm going to make my comments very brief, and then I'm going to defer to the expert, Mike Benincasa, who has more experience than all of us. So I'm going to start with Chapter 11 of New York State Code under historic buildings and the classification of a historic building. There are provisions for a historic structure, keeping an existing staircase, keeping a existing structure if the structure is deemed unsafe or unsound. It is allowed to be rebuilt. When it's rebuilt, it has to be built to code. The minute you lift that house and you put a new foundation in, it's called a level 1 alteration, and you have to adhere to New York State Building Code therein. And once a structural element of that property is deemed unsound, in this case the roof, Mark Schiffert, engineer, came down, told us that the roof would not support a dormer on the west elevation. We had to reframe it. How do we reframe it? We framed it to code. So you're not going to want to hear this, but in the eyes of the state at this point, it's a level 2 alteration. It is no longer considered a historic structure. The minute we do an addition, the minute we lift the house, in the eyes of the state, is no longer a historic structure. So if the stairs came down, whether or not they should have come down or whether or not they're down, and now we have to rebuild them. How do we have to rebuild them, Mike? According to New York State Code. And so now I'll turn it over to Mike, and he will expound on the guidelines of the New York State Code in reference to historic structures in a level 2 alteration.
Good evening. Could everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So how building codes work is that there's a path to compliance. So the first thing you do in reviewing a project, you look at the use. All right, what's the use here? It's a resident. So you go to the residential code of the state of New York. Second thing you determine is it a new construction or is it a renovation, alteration? In this case, it's a alteration. So you go to Appendix J in the residential code of the state of New York, and you delve into that and you examine what's going to be done to the house. In this case, it meets the criteria of a level 2 alteration, which includes reconfiguration of the space inside, removal of windows, doors, etc. It also says in the alteration level 2 that, well, it sends you to AJ 601.3, which tells you what elements need to be complied with. And it gives you a list of certain things. And basically what it says, if something is existing, right, it's allowed to stay. Once you remove it, it needs to be compliant with the code. There is an exception in the code for historic houses, and it throws you over to AJ 109. I'm sorry, AJ 901. The only exception in that section is for the means of egress. And it talks about existing doorway openings, corridors, staircase widths, etc. Okay, existing. This is a new staircase. When I was there, the old one was gone. So that means a new one has to be compliant. And that means that not only the risers, the headroom at the top of the step has to be compliant. As far as some of the comments, oh, eliminate 2 steps, you can't eliminate 2 steps. You need to get to the second floor. The roof system over that stairway was replaced. There's nothing sistered there. They're all new roof rafters. Once you replace those roof rafters, they have to have been replaced to code. And if it's over a stairway, that need to have the proper height to allow your 6'8" headroom at the top of those stairs. The only way to achieve that is by means of a dormer. So as a codes guy, I don't really get into the historic aspect of it once something is gone. Once something is gone, it needs to comply with the current code. It's very clear in the code book that that is the case. Now, Richard Smith, I put a call into Richard Smith also. The state is working from home. He hasn't gotten back to me. But I'm confident that he's going to come back and say, if an element or system is replaced, it needs to comply. If it doesn't comply, the home is going to be in violation of the residential code of the state of New York. That's not something that you want. I get it. I get historic stuff and everything. But again, it's health and safety. Once you pull something out, it needs to comply. So,
the issue there, and we're going to adjourn on this, is once something's been pulled out, and there have been things that have been pulled out that should not have been pulled out there. So I said we're not going to do the enforcement issue, but there are elements in terms of, whether the elements of the rafters were replaced, what they had to be replaced and things like that. So the logic doesn't hold for me. I know Alice wants to check out the legal aspect. And
Can I just interject one thing?
just,
It's not logic at this point. It's
okay, and then you
code.
put in a new staircase when there was an existing one. So, the logic doesn't hold to me.
No, there's no reason why we couldn't replace the staircase. There's
Yeah,
no.
okay.
it's an-
Anyway,
it
Mike,
was
you
a-
wanted to
it
say
was a-
something?
Why don't we let, if I may, why don't we let Alice tweak this? People, I think it might help everybody. And again, it's your calendar. I'm just trying to move things along.
Yeah.
I agree with John. I think we need to hear from Alice's point of view what, the guidance that will
Yeah.
tell us.
Okay, that's good guidance, John. Thank you.
Mike, can I ask you to share your contact with Richard Smith with me offline? Maybe tomorrow?
Yeah. Yes. I'll
Thank
do
you.
that.
Okay, great. So I don't know whether this is the applicant's request to adjourn or the board's request to adjourn, Alice. Does it matter?
Doesn't matter.
We're gonna adjourn.
How was that?
We're
I
gonna
move-
adjourn.
Okay. All right, I move that we adjourn to our next meeting, Alice, or the one after that, Alice and John?
I'm hesitant to put it on for 12/28.
Yeah. because we're
No,
not-
That's not enough time. That,
Yeah.
given the
Okay.
holidays and everything, yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
not likely to get a
You're gonna
response.
need a lot of time.
okay,
Okay.
great. So I move that we adjourn to our next, I'm sorry, to the meeting of January 10th. All right, and John, I'm
Second.
sorry if we got a little mixed up there, but I know there's good intents all around. So, all right, everybody, we'll see you January 10th.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Thanks.
All right, great, thanks. Bye-bye.
I don't think we all voted on that, but.
All in favor?
Oh, sorry, aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, it's unanimous, thank you.
Now it's
I think
official, okay.
Even John
Can I
Bennett
just
voted
get a
on that.
second on that? I'm sorry.
Oh,
I
a second
seconded it.
from
Thank
John
you.
Gregory. All right. All right. So let's put out to the public again, we're only on we've just finished number 4, folks.
I
And
got another adjournment.
Okay.
I got an adjournment request. Oh, wait, never mind. Let's wait.
okay.
All right.
Now the question, remember, do you want to take a 10 or 15-minute break? Or do you want to continue?
At least a short bio break here. We got hours.
John, are you in the next one? No?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, I'll leave you in.
All right, let's do one more and then let's take a 10 or 15-minute break, okay? Okay, we've got Post Crossing LLC adjourned pending ZBA approval, and then we have Fairlane Realty. That was another request for an adjournment to, I think they said like January, let me pull that out, January 24th. So under this, I would accept their adjournment subject to reposting and mailing. Okay, so I move that we accept the applicant's request and notify them that they have to repost and mail. Okay. Do I have a second on that?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Okay, that's unanimous. So Jackie, you got that for Fairlane? Okay, now let's do, let's see. Okay, let's see. Okay, let's see if we can squeeze this one in before our break. So number 7, Alvisi Orzini and Jeffrey Van Remdonk at 143 Herrick Road. Okay. So John and Lisa, tell us who you are, and then I would just like to make a brief introduction before we begin, okay?
Can I just ask one question
Yes.
first? Is 252 adjourning or are they going forward?
I think they're going forward.
Okay, I got confused with 242, I guess. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
Sorry for the squeaking in the background. It's not a clown.
Not all dog toys have.
It's a puppy. And if that's keeping her busy right now, let's bear with it. So anyway, John and Lisa, introduce yourself, then I'll just make a brief comment.
My name is John Bennett. I represent the applicant, 212 Windmill Lane, Southampton, New York, Bennett and Reed, and Lisa here with us as well.
Okay.
Lisa Zaloga, I'm the architect for the applicant, 1375 North Sea Road, Southampton.
Okay, so coming out of the last meeting, LBC indicated by his comments that he was a bit confused and I guess confused as to which board, the ZBA or the ARB has either dominance or is going to, make a decision and how it impacts him. And so the history of this is it was going before the ZBA. The ZBA's chair, Mark Greenwald, said, I think this is, the variance is small, but it's an historic property. We'd like you guys to have some, meaning the Board of Historic Preservation.
Jeff, if I can interject, that variance is being withdrawn.
Okay, regardless, let me finish because it has a bearing on to what we're looking at. So in our discussion last week, there was a discussion about where to build out one way versus the other way, and then trying not to create a situation where you would need a variance. In a subsequent conversation with the chair of the ZBA, in as much as he referred this to us for historic consideration, listen up, John.
Already troubled.
He said, if in the determination or the discussion that the ARB, the Board of Historical Review and Historic Preservation, have that may result in the need for a variance, that the ZBA would be amenable to listening to concerns of the ARB and listening and hearing their recommendations. Okay, so what I'm saying is there's room for collaboration here.
This is troubling, and you're going to have to make me make a counter statement because this is exceedingly troubling.
Okay.
So let me explain to you what the village code of the Village of Southampton says in terms of the Zoning Board of Appeals and the Architectural Review Board. There is one section and one section alone.
Yes.
That talks about referrals to the Zoning Board of Appeals in the case of a historic building. And that's where the building itself, the entire thing, is being threatened with demolition. And where did that come from? That came from, it's the 1708 house. They had a permit to demolish that. I know this legislative history extremely well. They had a permit to demolish that. And to save it, the trustees created a section of the code allowing, and this is 30 some odd years ago, more than 30 years ago. I have the benefit of knowing of the legislative history. Probably you folks don't, but maybe you do, I don't know. But so the trustees created that section so someone was able to change that from a single family residence to what it is now. Okay. And that's what that section is for. That section doesn't allow a zoning board of appeals and an architectural review board, particularly where there's no application pending before the zoning board of appeals having to do with what is before this board, to have any sort of communications, number one. And number two, whether or not the zoning board of appeals would smile on it smacks of prejudgment, number one. And number two, there's nothing to say that the neighbors would smile on it. So it's incumbent on you to decide this application before you. And I must wholeheartedly object to any conversations between the chairman of the zoning board of appeals, any member of the zoning board of appeals, and this pending applications. It's improper. It's not guided by the guidelines. It's happening outside of the public forum when there's a pending application. It's like in The Big Lebowski. This ain't Vietnam. There are rules.
Johnny, I'm not sure that was the case the last
Anyway.
meeting. There was some confusion, seriously, from the homeowner about
Well, there's no
what they could.
confusion,
Well,
but
would you just let me finish,
lawyer.
please? We said if they had any question about what they could do with their property, we were not the ones to have that discussion. That was the issue. If they had some question about what they could do with the extension, that was up to the zoning or the zoning board, not us.
No, there's no
Anyway.
pending application before the zoning board of appeals as to the extension.
No,
So-
that wasn't the point. Anyway.
What was the point? No, I'm really trying to understand. I
No,
don't.
the issue was that we had the impression that there was some confusion on their part about what they could do with their proposed addition to their house. If that was the case, that wasn't something we could resolve for them. We referred them to the other department to get that direction. That's all we did.
I listened to the tape. I didn't hear any confusion. And
Okay,
how could there
so
be any
look, we are where we are. You're before us tonight. You
How do
can
we just present?
make your case. We'll view it on the basis of the architectural review. I was just trying, sometimes the boards, it works out best for the applicant. If there can be some collegiality, and so anyway, but John, I don't know.
It
Present
doesn't
to us.
work that way.
John, present to us. And-
I'll let your counsel advise you off the record.
And if you think I broke any standards,
Yes.
take
Yes.
it up with the ethics board. Let's go.
No. I don't do that. I will suggest that you speak to your counsel about the propriety of what you've just laid out.
I feel very comfortable
Okay.
I did, and if you have any issues, you can discuss it with the ethics board. Let's go.
Yeah. No. I'm not talking about the ethics board. I'm talking about.
You said it was
I'm talking
impropriety.
about
Impropriety
communications
connotes
between
ethics.
two
Let's just go
chairmen.
on. Let's go on. Let's hear the application.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I'm sorry, John. Sometimes I'm unbelievable. People.
No.
Okay.
You're not supposed to be talking to the chairman of the zoning board of appeals about an application before you.
Then you know what?
and there's
I'll
nothing
recuse, I'll
before
tell you
him.
what, I'll recuse myself, and here's what happens. You've got one less vote that could have gone in your favor.
What is that, a threat?
I'm recusing my, I'm
Can we
recusing.
calm
I'm
down here? Can we
recusing
get back to the point of
myself.
this meeting? Can we please?
Guys,
Can
I
we-
just recused myself. Alice, I'm recusing
But
myself.
Jeff, you don't have cause to recuse yourself.
All right, then I'll stick around. So go ahead, John.
All right, Lisa's going to present the matter, and then I'll explain to you why we think from a standards point of view, what has been presented has not only consistent with this board's manner of treating additions to contributing structures, but is also a very sympathetic addition, is in conformance with the directives of the interior guidelines, which is one of the standards contained in the code, and should be viewed upon favorably by this board.
Right. Okay, go ahead, Lisa. If I'm out of view, it's not because I'm out of sight. I just have to attend to things.
Is it possible for me to share my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
Okay.
As long as it was submitted.
It was submitted.
Perfect, thank you.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I just wanted to kind of go back and start with the basics of what we were actually trying to accomplish so that the board could understand that and how we got to where we are. The house, as we are all aware, was built somewhere in the 1909 range. And it seems to have been built probably as a commercial building. I know that it's been called a dress shop, a tea room, an antique shop, a music studio. So whether it started out as a residence or not, I'm not 100% sure, but it definitely has had some different uses. So my client has a family, 2 young boys, and he's basically looking to get some bedrooms that have light, ventilation, egress, and an internal access to the main floor of the house. So on the left here, we have the existing lower level, which is about 50% underground. There are 2 bedrooms down here. The stair to get to this lower level is actually exterior. So you would come out the upstairs, down the stairs that are on the side of this, and then down these stairs to get to this lower level. So it's not a great layout for a residence. So primary goal to create lower level bedrooms and an internal stair. And in order to do that, the original proposal that you saw placed the exterior, or placed the new internal stair in the location where the current stairs are. That was actually what was in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals. This a very small portion of the addition there, because it was within the front yard setback off of Little Plains. So that application came before you, and I did submit a little drawing that shows you what the original application was, that actually was submitted by Bill Slight. Had a 45'8" projection to the south. It had a complete renovation, removal of the existing kind of, somewhat iconic stairway into the house. And the board, it was all a brick addition. The board did not seem to find that it was acceptable for multiple reasons. We then came before the board a couple weeks ago. We had reduced the footprint to a 25-foot projection. We were maintaining the stairs, but we were pushing them out. So we were actually reconstructing them about 3.5 feet further. And our addition had become a glass and wood frame addition. The current proposal to you now is a 19.5-foot projection. Again, on the west end of the house. It does not cover up any of the south facade that is existing. The addition is a glass structure that is very similar to the glass entry that has been seen in several of the old photographs. And the existing stairway is going to remain exactly as is, with the exception, if you will, of putting that glass facade back underneath the existing overhang, as it was shown in this photograph here, as well as, there's another photograph. Is it this one? And as it is shown in this one here. So that's basically the history of how we got to where we are. We have reduced our addition by about 57% in terms of our projection towards the south. Some of the comments that were made in the original presentations, one of the comments had to do with the current exterior wall, which will become an interior wall behind this glass facade, and the concept of removing that. So we are now maintaining that. So the entire south brick facade will be maintained. We will be going back to the glass facade that's shown in the historic photos, and we will be maintaining the stairway exactly as is. So I believe the comments that the board made at the previous meetings, I believe that should be acceptable to most of the conversations that were had. The western addition, there's been some talk about whether the addition should just project to the west and not have any projection to the south, and that the swimming pool is not historic and didn't really have any reference to the house and the gazebo. I did find some old pictures, not old pictures, some pictures of the gazebo and the relationship to the swimming pool. And there's a very strong relationship between the two. This was from House and Garden. This very light, whimsical gazebo, it does have a very strong relationship to the swimming pool. And I think that this is a very strong relationship. I believe that they created the swimming pool with the angles to have a stronger relationship with the studio. And both of these structures can be seen on the Sanborn maps. So they were both built back in early 1900s. This pool was put in around the 80s. Let me go back here. So no matter what, whether we were adding on just in the western direction or whether it does project forward to the south, this end of the house, this western end of the house, would be modified in some form or fashion. So we basically looked at the guidelines that the village has for adding on to a house of this magnitude. So section 12 basically says, how the design process for additions. And I think that we've tried to hit on all of them. Locate additions to the rear or the least public side of the building. This house is on a corner lot, so we really have no place on this house that would not be, quote, visible from the street. Even again, just adding on to the west side, it would still be visible from Herrick Road. So no matter where the addition is, I think it's visible. And we are locating the addition on the western end, which is the least visible of all, if you will. Do not obscure or destroy characteristic features of the historic structures when making applications. The loss of any historic material should be minimal. That goes back to, we are maintaining the south facade. Should somebody ever want to come and remove our additions, the south facade would be maintained, as is the east facade, which are the two visible and street-facing facades. Again, the north facade would remain also, with just a small modification on the west end. I believe that would be minimal under the guidelines. Whenever possible, design and construct additions so that the basic form and character of the historic building can remain intact. Should they ever be removed? Again, that was part of maintaining the south facade. Make the addition compatible with surrounding historic buildings in size, scale, materials, mass, and roof forms. This was the rendering that was put in last Thursday. Again, this is our maintaining the existing entry and filling in the glass pavilion that used to be there. We have lowered the height of the pavilion that we're adding on. We have shortened the pavilion by about 6 feet in an attempt, again, as I said, to minimize our projection south. We do still have the lower level, which is part of our program with gaining the bedrooms. But the whole structure has been reduced by about 6 feet, and it's become an entire glass pavilion, very reminiscent of all of the light cuts that are existing, as well as the glass of the gazebo area. So I believe in terms of size and scale, that we've done that. Do not introduce a new architectural style or too closely mimic the style of the existing building. Additions should be simply and cleanly designed in a compatible but not imitative style. Again, that goes back to the first iteration, which was a brick addition, and I believe that the board was leading towards a more glass and open light structure that did not mimic anything that was on the property here. And then adhere to the principle of additive massing, where an addition is secondary to the main mass of the building rather than a predominant element. Historic buildings often have smaller additions at the rear of the buildings or at the sides. And again, this is to the side. We don't have a rear. I also believe that, so we basically, I think we have modified the entry back to exactly as it is. And we have infilled with the glass as was seen in these older photographs. And this one here. So entry-wise, I think we're back to where the board wanted us to be. The addition, again, has been shortened, and the height is about 1 foot and change below the existing flat roof of the existing house. And also, just as point of reference, because we've talked about color, and our goal is to paint the windows as well as the addition, the gray color. And I believe there was some conversation as to whether it had ever been white. You can see this picture here. It was obviously white. We also have I don't know where I put it now. The nomination for when the building became landmarked. It talks about the glass enclosed porch that was there, as well as it makes note that the windows within the arches were painted white. So that was at the time that it became landmarked. And somewhere I had something else, but I don't know where it is. Nope, that's the historic. So the last thing that I would say is just that we also took a look at the current Rogers Memorial Library, which is also a brick building. And I believe that the facade of that building is considered very important. I don't know if this building, I don't think this building is landmarked, but I believe the facade is an extremely important facade in the village. And it, of course, also at one point in time was painted red, and just recently has been painted that same gray color that we're looking at. And I think it complements the brick very nicely. And I believe there was also an old picture of the library that also had white at one point. So I don't think that we're asking for anything out of the realm of normal things to be painting it a lighter color. And then again, just the sandboard maps show that both the gazebo and the house were here. I think that's pretty much everything that I wanted to say.
Okay, John, did you want to add anything else to that? Otherwise, I'll
Yeah, a fair amount.
comments.
Yeah,
Okay.
a fair amount. This house, I've longtime village resident. This house makes its presence known primarily on Little Plains Road. It's because it has that tower that hugs Little Plains Road, and it's relative to its very prominent presence on Little Plains Road. Doesn't have that same presence on Herrick. I think you speak to any longtime village residents. This used to be known as the Sopsey House, is one of the prior owners. It all presents primarily on Little Plains Road. What have we done here? We're trying to preserve as much of the fabric as possible. Moving that, if you go back to the site plan, moving the addition, the westerly addition to the north would encapsulate that one tower, the westerly tower. We don't want to do that. what we've done here is something that's totally in adherence with the guidelines. I want to also remind the board, this house could be 1,900 square foot bigger under the GFA than it is now. And we have been very, very non-aggressive. This is a 733 square foot addition to it, which does exactly what the code says it should do. The historic codes. If you continue this thing along the west, you'd really be making a sort of a bastardized attempt to do something that the interior guidelines say that you're not supposed to. You're supposed to avoid the design that unifies two volumes. We're not trying to do that. If you read all of the direction that the Interior Secretary guidelines head you in, which is make the addition modest, make it something that you can take away, and it looks like it was never there, but make it something that doesn't mimic, which I think quite candidly, I understand the board's concern about the initial application. It was mimicry of a design, and you couldn't, you wouldn't be able to tell it apart from the other part of the main part of the building, other than someone who was aware of the building historically. So I understand why the board was concerned about the main design. I even thought that the last iteration before the new iteration did it wonderfully, but we understand there was some concern by some of the board members of its projection to the west. I will say, and I don't want to get into this too much, but I feel quite confident that this is really nothing more than an attempt to exercise site plan review authority, which the board is well aware it does not have, either in historic situations or non-historic situations, and that's clear. And there's a case, the case law on is very clear, specific to this board. This is an attempt to exercise site plan review authority if you're going to say, I can't project that that addition to the south. What we've done, nevertheless, is try to minimize it. We started out with something, we got smaller, we're getting smaller yet. We haven't told the board to go pound salt. In effect, we've tried to listen, but there has to be a compromise, particularly when you are aware of the fact that this meets what the Secretary's guidelines say it should be. It is subservient. It hardly takes over or announces itself too proudly as in relationship to the existing building. What we've really tried to do is put a pavilion here. One of the board members said, make it like a pavilion. So what did I do? I looked at the couple of the architecture guidelines and books and definitional books. It was a dictionary of classical architecture as a pavilion, a projecting subdivision of some larger building forming an angle feature. Another dictionary of historic architecture, a prominent portion, usually central or terminal, identified by projection and height. So what we're doing here is something very classic in terms of a pavilion. We're making it subservient, we're making it smaller, we're projecting it, we're making it an angle feature. And I was quite surprised. I thought we had done all the things that I had seen this board in their attempt to minimize additions to historic structures do in the past. There simply is no, I don't think, and again, I'll bring it up because I really don't want to get in too much of I really want you to like this. I want you to like this edition because I think we've gone to great lengths to do what we're supposed to do, as opposed to being overly legalistic. But I think I would be remiss in not saying, I think what you're trying to do here, one, any board members are trying to make this an east-west edition, as opposed to this angled subservient edition, is to exercise a site plan review that you don't have. And what's also important is, remember, when this was a landmark, the gazebo was there as well. And there's been an incredibly sensitive location of a pool which has great relationship to the gazebo. And why interrupt that unless there's some really compelling reason? We're not destroying the fabric of this structure. We're being quite subservient to it. We're avoiding a design that unifies two volumes, which would attempt to unify that, which I think an East-West edition would do. I have scratched my head when I first saw, the first iteration quite candidly, I said, well, the board's going to hate that because it's mimicry. I get it. I understand that. But this is doing what we're supposed to do under the interior guidelines, and it's a
Okay.
modest relative to what could happen.
All right, great. Thank you, John. So let me turn it over to the board in any particular order, whoever.
I'd like to start.
Okay, Peter.
Kind of a minor point. I want to share my screen. So Lisa, I need
Wait,
you to.
stop sharing mine. Hold on.
I got it.
Thank you.
I got it, Lisa.
Okay.
Okay, I just wanted, to your point about, preserving the envelope of the building so that if this addition is removed, it can go back. Can I please then ask you to respect the openings, the existing openings on the west elevation and maintain the masonry wall? I understand that they will be open to an interior space, and I wouldn't be opposed to one of them's a window, to dropping it to the floor so you could use it as a passage. But that at least, and of course preserving the tracery, or perhaps even modifying it so that it's like an overdoor within the opening. But I think if you could maintain the west masonry elevations, you would go further you'd have more support for your argument of an addition that's removable. I mean, unless you're just putting one big opening and then you're filling up with pantry and stuff. So I think I would just ask you to look more closely at that elevation, even though it's going to be on the inside.
Peter,
Okay.
if I may, I just wanted to respond directly to that. I would recommend that highly. I understand why you want to preserve that. It's really quite wonderful. And I can imagine, I'll leave it up to the people that do this stuff, but I can imagine that could be particularly, if we can get this, if that's part of the price of the addition that we've talked about, I think it can be accomplished, and I certainly understand why you would want to preserve this lovely brick.
It'd be a very interesting interior detail. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and now I'm gonna, John, forgive me, I'm gonna bring up the taboo. I'm an architect, I solve problems. I have a hard time appreciating these things unless I really get into the weeds. And I asked Jeff if it would be possible to extend the first floor to the north to the extent of the north elevation adjacent on the other side of that octagonal piece. It would give you another 4 feet, and it would allow you to push your addition that much closer to. It would let the addition, project that much less towards the south. So that was and I didn't know I was going to start a shitstorm there with that simple question.
That's okay. Well, the fact of the matter is, we recognize that this is an historic structure, and we're all trying to do the best we can. We all recognize too that it's problematic to be used as a residence, and we're trying to solve that question. We've got some pretty smart people here in the form of Lisa and John and the board members. So we're all working towards that end. So it's not a show or storm. So
well, let me respond to that. I don't want to be in the situation where I go to the zoning board of appeals. This is what I'm hearing. But then I come back here and you're like, we don't care. We don't want any projection.
Well, I'm just
I'd have to
suggesting,
have some,
I'm looking for a way forward, okay? That's all.
Excuse me?
And maybe it's a dead letter. I don't know.
I appreciate it.
Let's stay on point. That's I'll go next. I agree with Peter. You finished? Sorry.
Yes, I finished.
Okay. I agree with Peter's comment, especially on that interior wall. I think, because it is a historic structure, everything that can be saved should be saved. And if that can be worked into the plan, that's great. My only concern is to tell you the truth, I agree with you, John, that the version that was done last time, I actually prefer. The original I didn't like. I think the only issue that at least I had with the last version was that roof line that was the same height as the existing structure. For me, had that one part been just reduced enough to show a difference of that elevation. I really liked the difference between the two parts that you added. It actually makes it look smaller in a way because one diminishes, is more diminished than the other. It just makes it kind of reduce in size. The new design, however, somehow it looks bigger in stature than what you had before. And I, you know,
To be honest, John,
it may be my own personal taste, but the staircases on both sides of the new design, and you know, I don't mean this to be insulting, but it looks kind of like a caboose on a train.
John, if I may, because I'm trying to get somewhere with this. I actually had the same feeling. I liked the design before this design. The only thing that I didn't like about it was that it didn't show in roof line some subservience.
And that's my only issue.
Yeah, and I agreed with you. I didn't, you know, shame on me. Maybe I didn't get enough shots in on design comment. I sometimes feel maybe I shouldn't, but I tended to agree with you. Even though it was a little bit more elongated, it appeared, and I think it's that wall, that southerly wall of glass that makes it appear bigger.
Right, and I actually think it looks attractive. It looks more like a greenhouse than a gallery to me, and I would even find that acceptable. But the staircases just somehow are a distraction for me. But I like the second version better if the roof line were more diminished. That's my.
I agree. I agree.
I have a question. It has to do with the entry. Lisa, can you pull back up the picture you had shown, which was that picture?
Yep, hold on.
Because while we're waiting for that, I agree with Lisa. I actually think there's a good relationship between the pergola and the pool. And I don't think we should ask that be changed. I think the thrust in the building is great. When I look at the front, there's a heaviness or a contemporary feeling to what I'm looking at in the current rendering versus the lightness that I saw in the historical reference.
Here you go. This one?
Yeah, because it's almost continuous glass across the front and there's decoration above the doors. Whereas what I'm looking at right now, I feel like the columns feel very heavy again and contemporary against what is part of the original structure. So if we could just figure out how to lighten that back up to get closer to what that looked like. Or even if the reference was the window up and to the right, if you look at the window versus column dimensions of the porch versus the window, it just feels very heavy and contemporary to me. As for the addition to the left, I kind of agree that the stairway makes it feel heavy, but I think the subservient roof is great. And I think we've come light years and we're getting closer.
So just out of curiosity, does that mean that you kind of prefer the second version as well, or?
I'm between. If the second version had the subservient roof, I prefer that it doesn't come as far forward, but this addition of this porch across the front, when they have patio and gazebo on the other side, I'm not sure if it's necessary. But I like the fact that the roof is subservient to the main structure.
Okay.
My issue is just that there's a lightness in the historical reference picture, that wall of glass that goes across the front. There's a lightness to it that doesn't exist that feels different than the rendering that I'm seeing, which feels more contemporary versus the original part of the house.
Mark and Lisa, does it have anything to do with the cornice work that's used?
The little corbels here?
Yeah.
And also I think it's the structure width between the windows is heavy in the rendering, and it's very, very almost non-existent in this.
Right. Those posts are currently there now.
Yeah.
Could we recreate what's shown on the historic photograph? Lisa?
I'm working on it.
The ones that's on the screen.
Yes, no, I mean, I would imagine that we could. It's just, you know, those are currently existing. Those posts are currently existing.
I
So
know, but we're
as
changing
long as the
house.
board is okay with us taking them down, because I don't know if they're considered historic. They're like
I
they're
don't know how
current,
they
those
would-
Very
4
good
posts are
question.
currently there.
I
Huh?
don't know.
Very
I
good
don't know how-
question.
I don't know how they would be if you're showing a photograph which, based on that car, is like in the 70s.
It's an iteration.
Right, but now when they took that glass wall out, they needed to hold that roof up, so they put 4
Right.
posts there. So now those 4 posts are there. So I mean, I can, as long as the board is not going to then be upset with me taking them down.
From this picture here, and I don't know which reference that is, but from that picture there, it just feels like the column width has gotten wider.
Yes.
Okay, that's just the rendering. That's just the rendering.
And therefore, I think, and between that and the color, it just makes it feel heavy and a little bit more contemporary.
Yeah, I can understand. It's just the rendering. What's there is going to stay there. The goal was to have what's there to stay there.
Okay, then maybe it's the rendering, because it does not look as heavy in this reference photo as it does in the rendering.
Okay.
Yeah, somehow the original windows that you're showing here unify the space in a way that doesn't currently exist.
Yes.
Uh-huh, that's true.
May I make a comment?
Please.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, in looking at both the nomination report, the individual reports that I got from the state and the image that you're showing, it does present itself as a continual glass facade. The other thing is the mullions are heavy and give some gravitas to the design, and those need to be reinforced, I think. And we also need, to look at sections and compare exactly what's going to be presented. The brackets also are not there in the drawing that you proposed, nor the cornice. And so you're really not reproducing what was there, but as Mark pointed out, presenting something that is much more modern looking. So if right now you've got an enfrainment with columns in the middle that makes it a tripartite entrance, whereas the historic photograph and then the nomination photograph shows actually there's a door open within a glass facade, or what presents itself as an all glass facade. Also, as I said before, by removing the brackets and the cornice, that presents itself as almost fascistic, for want of a better expression. Mussolini was
this rendering is actually kind of it was taken off of a photograph. So this is actually what it looks like currently: the roof line, the beam, the post, and we just infilled the glass doors in.
We're talking about going back, though.
Yes, no, that's fine. I'm just saying that these are in fact the posts that are there,
yes,
and that is the roof line that's there currently.
I
understand
that.
Right?
You want to go back in time.
I do, and I want them to be beefy the way they were originally. I mean, they're heavy, and the glass actually, when at least in a little photograph, looks like it's rectangular rather than square.
You know what I think has actually happened? I think in the rendering, the columns are not as wide, but what you're actually seeing in that rendering is also the framework of the window behind
Correct. Yes, you're correct.
So the columns are actually thinner than they appear in this rendering.
Yes, you're right. They are.
Because in the current existing, there's a solid panel at the bottom of each door.
Right.
Right. This is all framework in here.
Because in the existing,
that's column.
Yeah,
the columns are narrower.
There's also solid panels in each door.
Right, and they look square rather than rectangular, the way they did, and heavy muttons and mullions in the earlier iteration.
Okay.
Lisa, can we go back to that?
Which?
What you're showing right now.
Oh, yes. Yeah, we can go back to that.
I mean, it seems, we're trying to get somewhere here. It does seem, I understand, it's a more, it's a little bit more stark what you're showing there. This has some lightness to it.
So yes, we can certainly, put the corbels back and change the fenestration, the light cuts. And again, as long as the board is okay with us taking out those middle columns and replacing it, that's fine too.
And making the panes rectangular and the buttons and more.
Correct. Which I think is funny because I think the windows up in the up here are more square, but if you think that the rectangular light cut here is, I mean, that's fine.
Yeah, I think
these seem more square.
If you're returning to something, you should base it on the photograph, not just say, oh well.
Well, and when you think about it, the windows on the first floor are different than the second level too. So
Exactly.
there's a little inconsistency across the board here.
Exactly. Well
Yeah,
said.
there's not there. It's all different.
About the color, can you do a scrape so we can, see what was really there first? I mean, I'm open. I'm not. I just, but wouldn't it be helpful to know how it started out?
You could get that information from Bill Sofield because he did an actual paint analysis and got an historic preservation person to do spectrophotometry. It's late to analyze it. It wasn't conjecture; it was scientific.
Well, maybe we can just have that test done again.
If there's anything.
Okay. I mean, obviously it was white at one point, so because we also had I was noticing on the historic guidelines, your design guidelines, it's also here with it painted a light color.
Yep.
That's just a reflection. No, I'm kidding.
Well, the battleship gray that you refer to on the library, they said they did scrapes, but I'd actually like to see the scrapes. I mean, it would be nice to know about that too. Bob Hefner did not do it when he did the historic structures report, but he said that the substrate was green. So anyway, we'll see.
And I did find this old picture that it does appear that it was once a lighter color. So
and sort of greeny, yeah.
And so that's what we have now.
All right. So I guess as far as the addition goes, I agree with the other board members. I find that front stoop, at the front of the addition and the stairs awkward and odd. Maybe you could put them on the west side. I don't know.
Flanking that gives it more importance than it necessarily should have, is the way I feel with the stairwells. I think.
I don't know why you'd go there versus going to the gazebo, but that's me.
Well, if we were to go back to the
second,
this form of a structure, then we don't necessarily have this patio because that's
just my suggestion.
Patio happens. This lower section here is that patio.
God, it can just be taken off.
But we can move the stair here. It doesn't need to.
We can get rid of those flanking stairs, Lisa.
Yeah.
It's not part of that. It's not part of what I'll call the third design.
Right. We can get rid of the stairs. That's fine. But what I'm trying to find out is are we keeping this form or are we going back to this step down form?
That was just my personal preference. I'm not sure how the other board members felt, but I thought that if that intermediate version had a lower roof line for the part that's closest to the house, I think it would be fine. With the setback, as Peter described it, you're moving it back a bit as well.
Well, if we can get the variance, I think.
Yeah. I won't go there. Sorry.
I'm sorry. But it would make a difference. It would be 4 feet. It's a lot.
But even without that, I think it would be. This would be my choice. The second one.
In order to do this version here, somebody was saying that they thought that this roof line should step down and
Yes.
then this roof steps down, which makes this very low.
Well, it doesn't, wouldn't
Hence the
necessarily,
reason that we kept it all one level
I think
here.
my personal opinion is all one level is more successful. I just think the stairway in front of it that seems odd to me. Without that stairway in front of it, I'm just looking at that simple projection with one roof line. I think that's very successful.
I'd be fine with that. I
agree.
prefer the second one, but
All right, well, that makes everyone's life easier.
Sarah, do you agree?
I think it's just too fat, but that's, you know, you
Well,
can't win them all, basically.
well, and there's something else to think about here too. If the front door is redesigned to the original structure, would that be too much to have the same look times 3 on the addition? That's why I just prefer the middle version. That's just my, like I said, they both are fine. That would be my choice is the second one, but I can do either.
I think when you restore the, the heavy
Yes.
muttons in the
Yeah.
entrance, but,
You're making.
but
yeah.
not make the new addition with the same heavy muttons, keep the addition with light, more contemporary muttons, then it would be different enough.
Yeah, you're making
This
that
would-
differentiation.
So make this with the heavier buttons and keep this very light and airy.
Yes, yes, because you're actually copying something that you have physical, not physical, but you have documentary evidence. And by contrast, this would be lighter.
Okay. And removing the stair on this side
Mhm.
here.
Mhm.
Okay.
I do have to interject. And I'm not unappreciative in the way it's played out. I didn't like the off the record conversations between the board members. I'm just being honest with you, but so I'm not unappreciative of the motivation, Peter, but it lends an uncertainty. A neighbor to the north could come in and say, you don't have it doesn't have the classic case as someone who's been appearing before zoning boards of appeal forever. It doesn't, just because the chairman thinks that he can bring it across the finish line, doesn't mean the other board members would agree to it. It doesn't meet the classic 5-part variance test, all for the sake of 4 feet. I'm just concerned about what that brings into it. It's not the minimum variance necessary. I have another way of getting around the problem that's created by making it conform. At a minimum, I would certainly like, I don't want to be ping-ponged in a way if the board really, and then the other thing is that aren't we subsuming that tower there? So, but anyway, if that's what the board wants us to do, I guess we'll do. But I'm concerned about going there and then coming back. I'd have to have some sense of the board. I'd have to have, I guess, an approval subject to the zoning board of appeals approval, with the understanding that if I go there and I can't get it, you're going to understand that, and let me build that extra 4 feet to the south. I just don't want to get ping ponged. If you want me to make the trip to the zoning board of appeals, I'm truly going to need your support.
Hey,
'Cause
John.
I'm sorry. I thought we were pretty much in agreement to the current plan with the changes to the front.
Okay. Thank you. I'm just trying to be,
No, I understand, but I think that's the way it sounded to me. If we remove that staircase on the interior side, we maintain the interior wall and on the new part of the structure, and revert to the original front doors. I think we're there, right? Am I missing anything?
I just want to make sure, Lisa, I really think it's very important for us to retain that interior wall. It could be even though you can quibble, I don't want to quibble about interior, jurisdiction, everything. That could be a fantastic interior architectural attribute of the house. Do you think the client has a problem with that?
I think we can make it work.
Even, I know it sounds crazy, saving the window structures somehow, that would, so if it ever were going to be reversed, it would be there. I mean, I come from the Midwest where farmhouses have barns full of like the elements that were changed in the farmhouses over the years. So I don't know if that's even possible to do, but or if we can request that be the case for the owner, but it would be wonderful if they could save those elements.
What do the Brits call that? Borrowed light? You could have a window coming into the window, right?
So I have to remove the stair on the east side to maintain the interior wall on the west side, and to revert back to the front entry with the vertical panes, removing the columns, and heavier mullions.
The cornice detail.
And the cornice detail.
Alice, you were about to say something. If it's relevant, you're welcome to.
I am actually not sure if it's relevant anymore. I just wanted to say to John that a handful of times the board has written a letter of recommendation to the Zoning Board of Appeals saying that they have a preference for a design and recommend that the zoning board consider granting a variance for a historically important property. I don't know if we're still talking about that anymore, though.
It doesn't.
I think we've gotten past that.
Okay, very good.
So we're requesting an adjournment.
Yes.
All right, so I move that we accept the applicant's request to adjourn. John and Lisa, are we talking the 28th or we're talking January 10th?
The 28th, and we have to have it in by Thursday before.
Yeah,
we can do the 28th. We're on.
Yeah. Okay, again, that's the day before Christmas Eve.
John's happy with that.
It's not the day before Christmas Eve.
Yeah, the Thursday. Yeah.
Okay, Bailey will be
Right.
here. I'll be in Florida.
Right, isn't Christmas Eve Friday?
No, the day
New Year's Eve. It's the 24th.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. No, it's the day afterwards. But
I gotta
anyway,
be with my family in Elmira.
I thought we were your family.
Sometimes.
We're all on Zoom. We can be anywhere.
I didn't know you were from
I
Elmira,
gotta be with
John.
my family in Elmira.
Okay, so we're requesting,
The sailplane capital of the world.
I'm moving us along. We're requesting an adjournment.
Yes.
For the 28th.
All right, a second.
Aye.
All right, John, Mark, all in favor? Aye. All right, see you the 28th.
The 28th.
Thank you.
Have fun.
Okay, great. All righty, gang, thanks.
Thank you, Lisa.
Bye, Lisa.
Thank
Okay.
you.
So what do you folks want to do? You know what? I didn't ask for any public.
No. No, you didn't.
Okay. All right, well. Come back on the 28th.
We need a license to stand.
Okay, let's move on to the next one. Unless you guys want to take a break for 10 minutes.
5-minute bio break.
Was that,
I wanted to mention that we got an adjournment request
okay,
for 172 Somerset Avenue. It's number 4 under Driveway Gates Historic. So maybe you could announce it and we could take jurisdiction and put it on for 12/28.
okay. Oh, non-historic, right. Okay.
No, sorry.
Non-historic, right, okay. So in the application of Diane Cito at 172 Somerset Avenue for driveway gates. The applicant, one has submitted affidavits, correct?
And they are in order.
Okay, great, thank you. The applicant has requested an adjournment to our next meeting, the 28th. Do I have a second on accepting the applicant's request? See the second? Peter, okay, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay, great, okay. Anybody else out there want to adjourn? Again, it's 10:20, folks.
Yeah, I would like to take a break.
I need I need 5 minutes.
All right, so let's have a 10-minute break. We'll reconvene at 10:30.